On this episode of the DTVC podcast, I've got Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast on. We'll be looking at American Ninja, so definitely stay tuned for that. That was a very fun conversation we have there. Also, this is our maiden voyage on Jitsi, so first time recording on there. Everything sounded good. We do take a break about 45 minutes in because Jitsi only lets you record a gigabyte at a time, and I was worried that I was going to get close to the gigabyte, which when the first recording, the 45 minutes only went like 100 megabytes, so I still had a ways to go. So, we'll see going forward if I continue to do the break structure just to kind of keep underneath that gigabyte, but I definitely had a lot more time. I think the second half of the recording is like an hour and 20 minutes, and so it's like about a 2-hour episode, and I think that one was only like 200 megabytes. So so we'll see, but definitely a good start there with Jitsi as we're moving forward there. And then in terms of upcoming episodes, I've got some more recording to do, so once we get those episodes in the can, you'll know. We'll kind of mention it on social and all of that. Also, no plans to do any DTVC extra, but we'll see. I know I talked about doing that Nicolas Cage episode. Those movies are still available on different streamers that I subscribe to, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to do that. Another idea I had was doing Daredevil. The newest series is almost done, and I've been watching all the episodes. I know I do a lot of comic book stuff, though, so there is that part of it that I'm just I really like that kind of thing. It kind of brings me back to my childhood, and I've always been kind of interested in comic book stuff, and so the solo podcasts are a good outlet for that, but I also know that there's probably only so much comic book stuff that people want to hear, so there's that part of it, too. I think we do have a good overlap with the comic book audience there, so in a way it's good, but yeah, we'll see. Again, all that's to say, we'll see what happens with the DTVC Extra. The other thing is I have those back episodes that were lost in the TalkShoe server meltdown to put up. So I know I've got one more episode that John and Jamie did while I was getting married in 2014. So definitely get that one posted. Maybe I'll do that one on a Thursday at least. So we'll have some content coming up on Thursday, but we'll see what happens there. And then in terms of the site, probably going to do The Island, the Michael Jai White film. Probably do that one this weekend. Watched that one a little while ago. It's been relegated to Starz Purgatory, but I did have a free week of Starz recently, so I was able to fit it in and watch it during that period of time. So we'll see. But that's probably the one we'll do this upcoming weekend. We have a couple in the hopper. We've got that one, Darkness of Man, the Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that we did a really great episode with Sean Malloy from I Must Break This Podcast. So you can check that out as well. I don't know what episode it was in the archives. It was a couple months ago that we did it, though. We had him on. It was a really fun conversation that we had about that. So probably get that review up soon. Also, I think it's Act of Vengeance. I think that's what it's called, or Acts of Vengeance. It's the Isaac Florentine movie that he did with Antonio Banderas. That one was on Tubi recently, got taken down. I watched it kind of in there. So there's a few movies that I've got planned to possibly do. So just keep an eye out, watch this space. Also trying to get some indie reviews in as well. I've got Baby in the Basket. That one's been sitting in the hopper for a while that I've got a review for an indie review. And then a couple of requests have come in recently that I haven't even responded to on Yahoo. So I've got to do that, reach out and say, yeah, I'll review your movie. So hopefully maybe as the summer goes on, we'll start doing that. So you might see some more Tuesday or Thursday reviews coming up in addition to your usual weekend review that I do there as well. And then I think that's kind of everything. I haven't guested on anybody's podcast in a while, at least not that I can think of. So I think this is pretty much it. Of course, my books, if you want to check out Nadia and Aiden, my newest book, I always appreciate people want to check that out. The link is in the podcast description. Also, my author page where you can find all my novels. So Chad and Accounting, Girl and a Gun, Holtman Arms, Don's House in the Mountains, other books that I have. Also Bainbridge. That's another one. I got to start to get that new cover up for that so people can check that one out as well. Anybody who supports any of my books, I always appreciate that. I think that's everything. I know here in the United States, it's tax day. Probably as you're listening to this, you'll be getting done with your tax. If you haven't gotten done with your taxes already, if you're kind of leaving it to the last minute. I was fortunate. I think I got mine done in March, but just a nice reminder as well, if you are in the United States and you're worrying about your taxes, just keep in mind that the only reason why you're worried about your taxes is because the tax prep industry has been paying your politicians off for years to make our tax codes as difficult and predatory as possible so that you have to turn to them to have them do your taxes and pay them every year to do your taxes. So when you see these commercials for these tax prep companies saying, hey, we take all the guesswork out, or, we take all the stress away, let us deal with it. They're taking stress away that they're giving you. So it's a really interesting concept there, right? Having a person who's treating you poorly say, oh, here, I'm going to help you. here's these headphones. You don't have to listen to me screaming at you. I guess I'll sell you a pair of headphones while I'm screaming at you, right? Maybe that's the equivalent for our tax prep industry here. So just keep that in mind as you're stressed out there. Hopefully that helps you feel a little bit better. I'm sure it probably won't, but hopefully this podcast, our conversation on American Ninja, will make you feel better as you're dealing with your taxes today, if that's the case here in the States. Yeah, and of course, if you're not in the United States, you can just listen to our podcast and just be happy that you're not living in the United States. I'm sure you're probably very happy that you're not living here right now. So, good place to leave it at that. So, why don't we have John from After Movie Diner play our theme song, and then we come back. We've got Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. We'll be talking about American Ninja. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I am joined by Todd Liebenow from Forgotten Filmcast. Welcome back, Todd.
Thanks for having me. I always love being on your show. It's I anytime you send me an invitation, I'm like, oh goody, get to do that again.
Yes. This should be a fun one. Also, to give people a sense of, I guess, how the sausage is made. This is my maiden voyage, our maiden voyage on Jitsi as a platform for recording, because Skype is going out. So I'd say sausage is made. Maybe the plant-based sausage is made, because there's nothing really being farmed or killed. Right? It's not good, right?
Yeah, but I mean, I'm a carnivore, so I I don't want it to be like made up of some kind of vegetable concoction if it doesn't have to be. Come on.
No, I totally understand. It's like the sausage itself always tastes great, especially if you get a nice quality sausage. But how it's made, it's funny. When I went and saw a game at the Oakland Athletics back when they played the Coliseum. Now they're in Sacramento or whatever is going on there. But
yeah, they actually don't have an official city right now. My wife was telling me this like a couple days ago, because I think when they did, I think the home opener of the Rockies just a week or so ago, it was the A's in town, and so she was looking at the paper. She's like, they're listed as like the no city A's. They don't actually have a city attached while this whole transition is happening.
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, because what happened was the owner. So the owner is the guy who he's the heir to the Gap, Banana Republic fortune. And
that sounds like something out of a canon movie, the Banana Republic fortune.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. He is a good villain for a canon movie. The owner. I mean, the way he kind of destroyed that A's team and then, wanted to move them. And I guess the deal was he was going to stay in Oakland for 3 years while they built the new ballpark in Vegas. And then the owner of the Kings in Sacramento was like, no, why don't you come play in our AAA ballpark that we have here? And it was his kind of way of like really trying to stick it to Oakland and the fans and everybody there who he's not happy with. So that's what he did. But it's, but that is also, like you said, they don't use the name Sacramento. So they're just the Athletics. So, yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, I was in San Francisco for a work thing, and I had tickets to go see an A's game just so I could say I've been to the Coliseum. And what happened was my flight was delayed. I was supposed to get on Tuesday, didn't get it till too late, so I missed that game. So that Wednesday there was like a work event, but I could go see the game late. So I got there for like the 7th inning. And whenever I go to a new ballpark, it's always a hot dog and a souvenir cup soda.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm wandering around trying to find where the hot dogs were. The best thing I could do was the plant-based section. So I got 2 plant-based hot dogs with the because I didn't have a lot of time. I needed to get to my seat and watch as much of the game as possible. So that's the only ballpark where I've done the plant-based hot dog.
Now, have you been out here to Coors Field yet?
So I haven't seen a game yet, but work event. My company has an office in Denver, and they had a big offsite there. And I remember I was like, oh, I've got to see a game while I'm out there. And it turned out they weren't playing. I found out the reason why they weren't playing was my company had booked. They picked the time when they weren't playing so they could book the ballpark, and we had a big event there. So it's one of those things. It's like if you think of ballparks as cathedrals, I've been inside, but I've never attended mass, so it doesn't account as an official ballpark for me. I've got to go back and actually see. I need to see a competitive pitch for it to count for me to be at a ballpark. So
yes. Well, I mean, the next time that it happens, I'll go with you. We'll go see a game at Coors Field. I mean, Coors Field, it's a lot of fun. I can't say that my my range of experience when it comes to ballparks around the country is as deep as yours. I pretty much it's limited to the ones I grew up with in the Chicago area, and then the last 30 years here in Colorado. But Coors Field is a great ballpark, and I mean, it's weird to think that it's moving towards being one of the older ballparks. Yes. It's celebrating 30 years this year. They're having the 30. That's kind of the big thing. Actually, this week I think they've been doing like the 30th anniversary celebration and such. But of course, the thing everybody always talks about with Coors Field, and I haven't actually partaken in this myself. One day I will get brave and do it. But food wise, we have the Rocky Mountain oysters.
Oh, okay.
Which do you know what a Rocky Mountain oyster is?
Yes, they are the a certain part of the bull. Yes,
yes, because they use every part of the bull. So.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that sounds because there's that. And I've never been to Seattle to see. Seattle's another one. I actually haven't been inside the park at Seattle, but I was visiting my sister there, and I went to the gift shop at the Mariners. They sell crickets, fried crickets.
Oh wow!
So
jeez.
Yeah, so between those two, those are interesting. Here in Philadelphia, you get a cheesesteak. That's that's as crazy as it gets here. But, yeah. Yeah, well, because Wrigley, I went to Wrigley last year, and I've got to say, I mean, I grew up near Fenway, so that was my ballpark growing up. And I think because I grew up near Fenway, I don't have. I saw it when it was at the dingiest and the worst, so I don't have as fond of memories. But like Wrigley Field, Bill Murray, they have a quote from Bill Murray when you're there, where he says when I went to my first game, I had this feeling like there was no place on earth that was better to be than something like that. And I think that's Wrigley, right? It's just like you when you're sitting there watching a game, even though it's I don't know how tall you are, but I'm only 5'7", and I still was scrunched in with my seats at Wrigley. But it is just such an amazing experience. But yeah, so I can imagine for you coming from Wrigley, it's almost like you kind of, it's almost like you can appreciate other ballparks because you kind of have Wrigley as like, okay, Wrigley's always going to be there. So, any place else, it's like, is it good or bad? You can kind of see it from that angle.
I haven't been to Wrigley Field in 30 plus years. I mean, since I moved to Colorado, my last time going to a game at Wrigley Field was the only night game that I've ever been to there.
Oh, nice.
Because, back then the lights were still fairly new. They'd only been there a couple of years at that point. But I mean, it was an every year ritual that sometime, usually around like late July, early August, something like that, is we would go down to Wrigley Field, and usually we were sitting over on the third base side, kind of right behind where the broadcast booths were. So one of the things we always watched for was seeing Harry Carey walk along the catwalk there, because the way they did the broadcasting there with WGN through their TV and their radio, they wanted Harry Carey to have time on both. He was primarily TV, but when you got to the end of the third inning, Harry Carey would switch over and go to radio for 3 innings. So you would see him walk across the catwalk from the TV booth to the radio booth, and then back again 3 innings later. So we were always watching to spot Harry there. And it's so much fun. I mean, just a wonderful part of my youth. And even, I mean, I haven't been to, oh boy, what I they switched the names around so much. Whatever the newer version of the what we would call Comiskey Park was. I've only been to the old Comiskey Park, the one that they tore down in the early 90s. Even that was such a great experience. They had the big, what we called the exploding scoreboard, and
Right.
and there was all kinds of weird things throughout the 70s and such, when the Bill Vecht era and such. We had like the showers and the stands and things like that. But it was a great atmosphere there too, though. I mean, I'd much rather be in the Wrigleyville neighborhood than the Comiskey neighborhood, but
Yes, that was my things. I was thinking, because I usually pick one ballpark a year. I think this year I'm going to do the Florida Marlins one, because I can fly into Fort Lauderdale for cheap and go catch a game that way. But I was looking at that. It's called, I think it's called Rate Field. It was Guaranteed Rate Field, or it's kind of a shame, because you're right. Like when I was a kid watching the Red Sox, they would do road trips, and that old Comiskey Field. It was that one and the Tigers Field that were just two great old fields to watch. And of course, I think everybody knows the old Comiskey from Disco Demolition Night, right? That's
right. Yeah.
That's what it's known for. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. What quick thing too about the lights. I was watching an old Bob Newhart with my wife the other day, and he was helping. I don't know if you remember the episode where he was helping the Cubs pitcher. Like the Cubs pitcher was like his patient, and then he ended up helping the catcher as well. And they were watching a game at night, and I was like, well, I said to him, I was like, that can't be the case. They can't be watching a Cubs game at night unless they're on the road, and road fans wouldn't be booing the Cubs catcher, because what would they care about the Cubs catcher? So they must be saying it's a home game, but you can't have a home game at night in Chicago in the 70s. And she was like, how would you know that? And I was like, well, I remember as a kid, I remember This Week in Baseball doing a huge thing about the first Cubs night game in the late 80s. It was 88, right?
Yeah, I think that's about right. Yeah, because like there was this whole like campaign and such, people that were against it. Do you remember the Tom Hanks movie Nothing in Common that he did with Jackie Gleason? This is kind of before Tom Hanks was big. This is kind of, well, it's between Splash and Big, so exactly. he wasn't quite the big name that he is now, but he did this movie, and it takes place in Chicago. They shot in Chicago, and there's one scene, I think it's like right early in the film, where you see him like walking to his office building, and he passes by one of these like tables that's set up of the people that are campaigning against night baseball at Wrigley Field. And I don't remember what the name of the organization was. It might have been just like Cubs, and it was like Citizens United for Baseball in the Sunshine, something like that, but I always kind of remember seeing that in that movie, and talking about like the time of Cubs games in movies and things like that. I always get thrown by Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Of course, takes place in Chicago. They go to a Cubs game, and so like the timing of the different things they do during the day, and they stop at a Cubs game, and I'm like, the timing does not match up with what we're seeing here, because Cubs games typically started at, I think it was 1:15 in the afternoon, before there was lights. That's what they always started, 1:15. Eventually they started doing some 3:20 games, like once a week, to try and get people who were, working most of the day and then could go to the game. But anyway, so this is before that with Ferris Bueller. So if the game started at like 1:15, and then again, going by, how many things they do before that, and then how many things they do after that, the timing does not match up, because you see the, because they cut between the actual game and then the principal, Rooney, at a restaurant, and the game is on TV. And you hear Harry Carey doing his play-by-play, and he mentions the pitcher's name, which is Lee Smith. Oh, right. Lee Smith would not have been playing that early in the game, because he was a relief pitcher. He was their ninth inning relief pitcher. He's the guy that came in and closed the game. And so at the time that this is supposed to take place, there's no way that Lee Smith would have been in the game yet. So that always bugged me about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. A perfect movie otherwise. Yeah. But that scene, they screwed up.
Yes, exactly. Right. Because that's right. Because Lee Smith, he ended up pitching for the Red Sox later, I think. And again, he was.
You might be right. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the closer then too, the ninth inning pitcher. So that's a really great point, because I've read that apparently like it is hard. people have tried to do the Ferris Bueller's Day Off thing, and it's what they usually end up doing is leaving the game early, and of course there's no way you could see Lee Smith pitch if you leave the game early. So
right,
wow, that's a really great. I never caught that before. I think you know what it was. I think when I heard Lee Smith, because saw him play with the Red Sox, I think it's hard for me to fathom that he played. That I was watching him play that at that time. You know what I mean? Like I forget that, I was watching baseball then too. I think of myself maybe sometimes that I'm younger than I am. So I guess I was like, nah, I didn't see Lee Smith play. He couldn't have been playing in the 80s. I saw him play in the 90s. It's like, no, that makes plenty of sense. There was plenty of guys who played in the 80s that I saw play in the 90s. So
yeah. Well, and that was a great time for the Cubs too. I mean, because Ferris Bueller's 86, 87, somewhere in that range. But 84, of course, is the year I always remember. That's the year the Cubs made it to the playoffs. And we were all like, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then those San Diego Padres, they messed it all up, but anyway.
I know. I mean, at least, right. I don't want to dump on the Padres because I feel bad, because they lost their football team and, they seem to do okay. But yeah, at least the Cubs can say, okay, they did win before the Padres. Because I think that was the thing as a Red Sox fan. I know it was like a good 12 years before the Cubs finally broke through, but it was like watching all these teams. I mean, when the Diamondbacks won in 01, or like the Marlins, I think in like the late 90s.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
These expansion teams are winning, and my Red Sox can't do it. And it didn't, and I think it's probably the same thing with the Cubs, where you're just like, oh my God. I mean, the Marlins, right, they ended up beating the Cubs that year with the Bartman thing. So it's like,
right, yeah.
Finally get there. I mean, I guess for the Cubs too, the other thing was the fact that the White Sox won.
Yeah, and see, I never felt bad about that. A lot of people in Chicago, they're like, you're either a Cubs fan or a Sox fan. And I've never subscribed to that. Part of it is probably because I grew up in a divided household. My mom's side of the family were all Cubs fans, and my dad's side of the family were all White Sox fans. My dad my dad just passed away a few months ago, but he used to always joke. He would say, like if we were sitting there watching a Cubs game, he would come in and he'd be like, hey, I hear the major leaguers are playing over on channel 44. Why don't you turn that on? He meant the White Sox.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. Like my grandfather grew up as a Boston Braves fan. And so thinking of that like divided household thing, it's like way generations before that, like everybody else in my family were Red Sox fans, but my grandfather, he saw Babe Ruth play with them. And so it's weird, like how, when you have two teams in the same city, like, I think my wife was saying that like her husband is a Mets fan. They're in upstate New York, and everybody else is a Yankees fan. So I guess you could just you could pick whichever one. But I've heard that. I think that joke with the White Sox fans about the major leaguers are playing on the other channel. And I think also too, like there's like bars. There's like White Sox themed bars, and like they refer to whoever's playing against the Cubs as the good guys. The good guys won.
Well, I mean, it even comes down to like not just North Side versus South Side. I've even found, I grew up in the suburbs, and you'd have like one town is Cubs fans. In fact, I would say that the town I grew up in was primarily Cubs fans, but the town right next door, primarily Sox fans, and I mean, it's not like you're driving several miles between them. It's like you cross the street and you're in, enemy territory there. but again, I never saw it as enemy territory. I mean, they were in different leagues, it's the same city. Come on, we can root for both of them. It's okay.
Well, that was the other thing too, growing up in the 80s and 90s. I think that people don't realize now with sports is that baseball was so divided amongst those leagues. Before I moved here to Philadelphia, the Red Sox had a really great third baseman, Wade Boggs, when I was growing up. And I used to wonder, I was like, why is This Week in Baseball not talking about Wade Boggs? Why don't they ever talk about Wade Boggs? They would always show Mike Schmidt, and you come down here and you realize, well, Mike Schmidt, and of course, as I grew up, I also realized it too. I learned that Mike Schmidt was maybe the best kind of all-around third baseman of all time. But, how would I know who Mike Schmidt is if I'm living in Boston and we're only seeing American League teams. And so now, of course, you see everybody. You see all the teams play each other. So it's a very different kind of sport now, too.
part of that too might have been just third base is kind of the most chronically ignored position in all of baseball. I remember taking note of this several years ago when the Cubs great Ron Santo finally posthumously was brought into the Baseball Hall of Fame. But he was a third baseman as well. And third base is the least represented position in the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's the least number of third basemen that are Hall of Famers. So it's the position nobody likes to remember.
Right. Well, it makes sense too, because I think there aren't a lot of players that just play it. Like I know, now you have Nolan Arenado, who's really good. But like, you think about.
Oh yeah, well, it's he's a former Rocky, I think, wasn't he?
Yes, I saw. Yeah. Yes, when the Rockies came here, my father-in-law, he made a point of like, we got to see the Phillies play the Rockies so we can see Arenado, and I mean, he did make some really great play. But with Arenado, it was like you watch him just in warm-ups, like the way he would handle the ball was just like another level. Yeah. But there aren't a lot of that. I think that like you think of like a Mike Schmidt, but like you think of like Cal Ripken. I think he started at shortstop and moved to third base. A lot of them, you kind of end up on third base as opposed to being like you were third base. So yeah, you can think of a few like Brooks Robinson, Schmidt, George Brett would have been one, but yeah, that makes sense. I never really thought of it, but you're right. Like third base it's not always like a position that you just have a third baseman. It's like a lot of times people move around to that position.
And it's weird too. And I mean, it's funny that we're talking so much about sports because I'm not a sports guy at all. I do enjoy baseball, but even then I'm like, I don't follow it super closely. But I mean, it would seem to me that third base is a position that would require a certain degree of skill that you're not necessarily going to see in other positions. I mean, you got to have a good arm on you. If you're going to save a one of those balls that looks foul, but it's actually fair. I mean, you got to figure most of the players are going to be right-handed, so they're going to have the wrong glove towards the ball, or the hand that doesn't have the glove on the side that the ball's on, so you gotta be a little acrobatic there, and stuff. It's not like a position that you can just write off and give to anybody.
Yeah, no, it's interesting with baseball with some of those things. Second baseman's another one where I think they don't have, there's not as many of them. And I think there's a sense of like, if you're like a professional level player, as long as you don't hurt us at third base, that's like the mindset. Like, I think that's the thing. And I know the Red Sox are dealing with that because they had a player, they're one of their best players. This guy Devers is horrible at third base. He's like just constantly errors. And they finally brought in a new third baseman, the guy from the Astros. And he was angry because now he's the designated hitter, which for people listening, designated hitter means you don't play the field at all. All you do is hit 4 times and that's your game.
I'm still hurt that the National League now has the designated hitter. But,
right, exactly. Yeah. It's funny. I was listening to a game last night here in Philly, and the announcer said the pitcher spot, and I think he misunderstood the pitcher spot, like because there's no more pitcher spot for hitting, with the Phillies. Yeah. But yeah, so I think that's one of the things. I think that's the way baseball. Yeah, it's interesting with that kind of thing where it's like if you've got a really great one, like a Nolan Arenado, you go with it. But it's like I think if the guy can hit. And he just doesn't make a lot of errors. It's like if he can throw the ball across to first base and most of the time get the out, it's like we'll take it. But then it's like, yeah, is that really Hall of Fame caliber?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. Well, maybe this is a good place for us to transition from All-American baseball to the one thing America is really known for, or not known for, I guess, and that's why the title is such a draw, right? We've got American Ninja today. We're going to be talking about the first of the American Ninja series.
Yeah. I mean, even back in the '80s, I remember when this came out, and you just kind of you kind of paused. You're like, wait a minute, American Ninja. Right. Okay, whatever.
Exactly. And the way they end up threading that needle in this film is pretty good too, in terms of like how we end up with an American Ninja. Yeah, I mean, looking at this, I mean, it's a Canon film. And one of the things that I noticed is that I hadn't seen an older Canon film in a while, so I forgot that the logo had sound initially, the animation.
Oh yeah. It's evolved a little bit over the years, but yeah, it has that boom, 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 boom. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. No. I mean, with Canon films, I think this is the first time I've had you on to talk about a Canon film. I mean, what is your experience with those movies?
Oh, I mean, Canon is just your heart swells when you sit down in front of a movie and you see that logo come
Yeah.
up. The studio just has such a wonderful, weird, bizarre history. When you think about the various things that kind of made up their legacy. Whether it is like ninja movies. I mean, when I hear the word ninja and it's an '80s movie, I automatically think, is it a canon movie? Because they had their ninja quote unquote trilogy. Which I didn't realize was a trilogy until he had Ninja 3: The Domination, which is amazing. And I remember when that came out, and I'm like, this is part 3. What were part 1 and 2? I don't remember those, but anyway, so they had their ninja movies. They had, just their big action, explosion type of things. I always assumed that the name Canon meant, because they're shooting cannons, things blow up. That's why they call the studio Canon. But then they also had like the breakdancing stuff, and and then like they would import other movies. They would distribute like foreign films in the U.S. and they even had their truly bizarre attempts to do other things, like The Apple, I think, is a canon movie, which it's just one of the craziest musicals ever made. And then of course there's the flirtations with trying to be compete with the big boys and get the big stars, where you have like Over the Top and even the debacle of Superman 4, things like that. So it's just such a wonderful, bizarre history with this studio.
Yeah, it's you funny when you mentioned Superman 4. It's like, I saw Morbius recently, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's the worst comic book movie of all time," and I'm like, "Did you know his Superman 4 is available on Max if you wanted to watch that?"
Well, and I remember when Superman 4 came out, and like, do you remember they would do like those little like souvenir magazines,
Oh
for
yes,
certain movies, like somewhere in my basement down here, I've still got like the Back to the Future one and the Goonies and things like that. But I seem to remember there being one for Superman 4, and or either that, or it was like an article in Starlog or something like that. But I remember there being, looking at this article, and there's these pictures and all this stuff, and then I see the movie, and I'm like, half this stuff is not in the movie. There was like a whole, like the nuclear man guy that you see in the movie we actually got was actually the second nuclear man. There was another one that they completely cut out of the movie, who looked like punk rock Bizarro or something like
right.
that. Yes. And it always has just amused the heck out of me that they were like, oh, let's get the young people in here, so they get John Cryer to
Right.
do Lex Luthor's nephew. And then of course now what was it on the Supergirl series where Cryer actually plays Lex Luthor? Well, I'm like,
Yes.
oh, that's great that it's come full circle like that.
Right. Yeah, because that was the thing with those CW shows, is that they had a real flair for that kind of thing. I remember they would, like I think, like you said, they brought in John Cryer in the Supergirl series. I remember they had the original Barry Allen from the
Yeah.
'90s Flash play the
Mm-hmm.
father to Barry. I mean, so yeah, they did such a great job with that. But yeah, Canon. It's like, it's almost like if they had the Golan and Globus, especially. I think it's probably more Golan out of those two that just really wanted to push, all of, keep pushing Canon's limits. And you wonder if they had just stuck with these ninja movies, the Chuck Norris movies, and the Bronsons, with the occasional Zeffirelli film and the occasional, I don't know. I mean, I guess, people like Norman Mailer and John Cassavetes really kind of put them through the ringer with their movies. They kind of inflated the budgets, but they just kind of stuck with these. I think, like, it would have been interesting to see how they would have chugged along there, as they would have. I think they would have made money, especially as the video age grew, and they wouldn't have necessarily been up against it like they were after the kind of the flops of like Superman 4 and Masters of the Universe.
Well, and I mean, when you think about the kinds of things they were putting out, it's definitely it's kind of I guess it's amazing if you didn't live through it like we did, but that they were putting things in theaters and such, because you look at their output and you kind of go, oh well, this is like what you see out of like your favorite PM Entertainment or things like that. They're definitely kind of kind of set the course for a lot of these other folks that really came to prominence when we got into the direct to video era.
Well, right. And I mean, just this movie we're going to be talking about here, American Ninja, according to IMDb, it says that a budget of $1 million, which I kind of believe that more. Sometimes with those budgets, you're not sure if you believe it or not. I've noticed recently, I think it's Wikipedia, where I don't know if these are like sort of like Manosphere guys that have jacked up the budget on the Marvels to make it seem like that's a bigger flop than it was. I think I saw on Wikipedia someone saying they had a budget of $365 million, and it's like, no, that movie did not cost that much money. It wasn't the same price as the Avengers Endgame, So, so you can't always trust those. But I think $1 million probably sounds right. I mean, it was shot in the Philippines. I can't imagine a lot of the actors. I mean, a lot of the actors that they use here are local actors that did Philippine productions. So. Right. So I imagine $1 million is probably what it did, and then made $10 million.
Well, and even Dudikoff. I mean, like this is his first, right? I think kind of.
I don't know if I think he did this before Radioactive. So he does Radioactive Dreams with Albert Pion, but there's no way that one was paying as much. And I think that was 21st Century Films. I don't think that was canon. And then, Bachelor Party, like you said, and he has like a very small part in Uncommon Valor. So kind of a connection because Ted Hotchkiss passed away recently. So,
I mean, looking over the list here, I mean, he's got little roles in things, that you recognize. I mean, like you say, Uncommon Valor, Bachelor Party. I guess he's in Tron, so, but yeah, this is where people started to pay attention to him. And and I mean, that's being generous. I mean, he's never been a huge star, but from what I've gathered from watching some of the canon documentaries that are out there, because there's several of them, there's whichever one I watched last. I mean, there's like a section in there where they talk about how, Golan and Globus were just like, this is the guy. This guy is going to be huge. I mean, this is, yes, we've got, Chuck Norris and Charles Bronson and those guys, but we're about to create our own guy like that. And it is Michael Dudikoff. And he made a bunch of movies for him and people love him in certain ways, but he definitely didn't reach those heights.
No, exactly. And, it's interesting because one of the things, this movie also has Steve James in it. And one of the things that Steve James was upset about was he felt he should have been the American Ninja because he had the martial arts skills. But, Menachem Golan was like, I wanted a, quote, all-American boy, close quote. And in his mind, that equaled white, blonde hair, blue eyes. That was his understanding of that, there's that racial aspect of it that's not good. But on the other hand, you're right. It's like they saw him and said, this is the guy that we're going to center everything around. And I think, Sam Furstenberg, who's the director of this, I think he does a really great job in the next movie of sort of mitigating Golan's want to center everything around Dudikoff, and then, Steve James being the one that was like the real martial arts talent, where he kind of makes it more of a buddy picture.
Yeah.
Its partners. Yeah.
The second one is the only one of the sequels that I've seen so far. And it's been a couple of years. It's probably been 5 years or so. I think I watched it during COVID. But my memory of that is that there's a lot more time given to Steve James, and there is a bit more of a buddy dynamic. He really gets more of a chance to shine in that. I mean, he's someone that, as you watch him in this film, the little bits that you get from him, you're going, man, if this guy had been making movies, 10 years prior to this, he would have been one of the great blaxploitation stars of the era,
Right. Well, because unfortunately, he's a little young. I think he was born in like 54, 55. So
right.
He was a little young for that era. And then the other thing, unfortunately, the sad part of it is that in the 90s, he dies of pancreatic cancer. And I think he would have kept pushing. He was getting more. Sam Furstenberg, someone who really liked working with him, so he would get roles with him. But he was getting like syndicated TV show deals, things like that. I think had he lived through into the 90s, into the 2000s, and kind of lived further, I think he would have started to get more of those roles. But unfortunately, it just didn't. But like you said, he's electric here. I think the character of Jax in the second Mortal Kombat and on, I think is based off of this character because his name's Jackson, and he throws people a lot. So I think that's
good skill to have. Yeah,
exactly. Now the female lead in this, so this the person who's almost kind of playing the princess in the castle in a sense of the way that the story rolls out, is Judy Aronson, who has an interesting 3-picture run here. She does Nightmare on Elm Street, or sorry, not Nightmare, Friday the 13th Final Chapter, which is my favorite in that series. Then she does this movie. Then she does Weird Science, and then kind of kind of falls off. I read that, I think because she wasn't getting the roles she wanted, she ended up just going into business, and I think she opened some clothing stores, and it's still kind of acting. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Judy Aronson from this period?
Well, it's funny because when I put this on again the other night, again, it's been several years since I've seen it. And, she shows up right at the beginning of the movie. And I was like, oh, yeah, we're Weird Science girl, and she's so adorable. But yeah, it is funny when you have, these films where you have like such a how shall we say, a jump in age,
yes,
like within the same year between their roles, and you would see that from time to time with these teen actors, teen in quotes, because in Weird Science she's playing a high school student, and here the same year in American Ninja, I if she's still a high schooler here, she shouldn't be hanging around with Michael Dudikoff yet. She's supposed to be a bit older in this film. And I was looking at that for some stuff on my own podcast here the other day. I was looking at, like Molly Ringwald did the same thing. Cause like you have her in, I think it's like 87 or so. She's in the movie Fresh Horses, which was supposed to be like a more adult type of a role for her. And in the same year, she's playing a high school student that gets pregnant in For Keeps, And so that was the challenge with these teen actors, is that, they were actually 20 somethings playing teenagers most of the time. And so, you'd see them occasionally jump back and forth from where they're supposed to be playing a high school student to where they're playing a more adult role. But yeah, Judy Aronson, she never, made it too terribly big. But, when she shows up in movies, it's kind of like, oh, yeah, it's her. I like her,
Right, exactly. And I think that might explain why she kind of got out of the business. We obviously, with the whole Weinstein thing and everything, we kind of know. And, we would always joke, everybody would joke, I don't say we always, but people would always joke about the casting couch idea. And it was always kind of understood as this shortcut to getting ahead as opposed to this coercive thing. But, it is one of those things where when you see an actor drop out of the business for a period or for whatever reason, you want to think it's an innocuous thing, like she's just not getting the roles that I was trying to think, like you said, like a Molly Ringwald might have been getting, or Demi Moore, or whoever, like she may not have progressed into those bigger roles and was like, okay, I'm going to do something else. You hope that's what it was, and it wasn't like, okay, she was just tired of handsy producers telling her what she needed to do to get into the movies, and she was like, I'm not doing that anymore. But it was kind of one of those things, like you wouldn't have seen her getting into those movies. Another actor I actually think about, like Mia Sara, didn't really do much either after Fair. She did like Time Cop, but
right.
So there are a few names from that era, and Judy Aronson, of course, she wouldn't have been as big as Mia Sara even. So if Mia Sara's not getting those roles, Judy Aronson probably wasn't either, and maybe she saw the writing on the wall and just said, you know what, I'm tired of these one-off appearances on 90210 or whatever shows I'm doing. Why don't I take some of my money? She was going to college at the time. Why don't I take some of this money that I've got, open a few businesses, real estate in LA at that time probably too. If you owned your shop, you owned the land that it was on, all that, you could probably make a lot more money than you could with these one-off parts here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I should have earlier, but I just now looked at her television resume, and yeah, she was in a bunch of shows this time. She's got one episode on just about everything here. Mr. Belvedere, Full House, like you said, 90210, Charles in Charge, Growing Pains, Rock. she's on everything here. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, because think about that movie, Weird Science, like, Bill Paxton, obviously, he kind of goes on, but I don't think he goes on because of Weird Science. I think he does other roles and kind of builds his resume. And then obviously Robert Downey Jr. But again, I don't think it's because of Weird Science that Robert Downey Jr. Becomes big either. So, and then Anthony Michael Hall, of course, he kind of falls out. I think as he gets older, people were just like, oh, well, we can't use you as the nerd anymore. So, right?
No, I think one of the things we can thank Weird Science for, thank in air quotes here. Right. Okay. So, Anthony Michael Hall, of course, is the star in that one. And Robert Downey Jr. plays one of the jerk guys that's giving him a hard time. And I don't know if they were friends beforehand, but I from what I've read on other things, I think this is where Anthony Michael Hall and Robert Downey Jr. kind of started to become buddies. And so then like it's towards the end of production on this, I think, or in that range where Anthony Michael Hall is offered the gig on Saturday Night Live.
Oh,
Remember, he
right.
was a cast member on Saturday Night Live, and something I read indicated that he, was kind of like, "Hey, can you give a job to my buddy Robert Downey Jr. here too?" And they're like, "All right, sure, whatever." So the fact that we could list Robert Downey Jr. as a cast member of Saturday Night Live, maybe because he and Anthony Michael Hall connected on Weird Science.
Yes. Yeah, that is that period, that sort of missing period of SNL, that kind of like between the Eddie Murphy years
Right.
and the Dana Carvey, that crew kind of coming on in the late 80s, that forgotten period, which I think whenever they do the documentaries, it's like a 5-minute mention of the forgotten period. It was
Yeah.
it almost ended
Oh,
the
yeah.
show.
Yeah, there was this time. Yeah, that season. Oh,
Yeah.
that was terrible. That was Lorne Michaels' return
Yeah.
because like you said, there was a period of about 5 years there, I think, where Lorne Michaels went away, and he comes back, and this cast that they assembled was a weird concoction of like people that were already somewhat established in movies, and then a few like the pulling from like the Groundlings or the Second Cities, so like that's the year that brought us John Lovitz and Nora Dunn. They were kind of coming from that comedy background, but then you had like Anthony Michael Hall, Robert Downey Jr., Joan Cusack, Randy Quaid.
Yeah.
They were cast members that year, and yeah, it was not good. It's just
No.
not good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. I mean, Julie Louis-Dreyfus. I think one of her sketches that she did with Jim Belushi. Somebody dragged that up recently. It was like a Thanksgiving one where she was playing
Hometown boy. I grew up in the Belushi's neighborhood. Yep.
Yes, right. Belushi, and I think that was part of it, maybe too, for Jim Belushi. It's almost like his brother was, kind of created, was a huge part of the start of the show, that he would be on it, and I mean he was funny enough, but it's like it's not that kind of iconic stuff that with Dana Carvey, Phil Hartman, and that crew take over in the late '80s. It was just kind of like, oh, and so I haven't seen any of the 50th anniversary stuff on it, but I feel like I wonder if they're going to give more life to that period or not.
They didn't.
I didn't think
One
so.
one day, you got to have me on, because I know Jim Belushi's done plenty of direct-to-video stuff.
Yes.
Someday we got to do a Belushi movie, because, like I said, the home that the Belushis grew up in is 5 blocks from the home that I grew up in. Some of my teachers had the Belushis as students, so they are local boys done good in my neighborhood.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, I would definitely, because you're right. I think we did a movie called Made Men on here one time. So Will from Exploding Helicopter, I know you've had on your show too.
Yeah.
He picked the theme of 2 non-Bonds, and essentially it's people who played James Bond who did direct-to-video movies. So Made Men had Timothy Dalton in it, so that was why we did that one. And Belushi was definitely, Jim Belushi. He hit that direct-to-video period for him before he gets on with According to Jim it's just it's a fascinating era of movies for him.
Very cool.
And it also explains why he did it. I think Judy Aronson, maybe coming back to her here, you can kind of see why like a Jim Belushi would do a sitcom, because it's like, I think Judy Aronson, she did try to get on. I think she did have a pilot for a show in between this period here that wasn't picked up by the networks, and that was like, I think that was kind of the thing for a lot of these actors is, can I get some kind of money, like consistent money coming in, because these movies don't pay a lot, and these one-off appearances don't pay a lot. We kind of know now from the Screen Actors Guild, when they were striking, like that these one-off appearances, they seem great for us, but they don't pay a lot. And you can see what like a Jim Belushi or even a Courtney Thorne Smith, and when they were like, oh, hey, do you want to do a sitcom according to Jim? And it's like, I don't care how bad the jokes are. I don't care how schlocky this thing is. Yeah, just sign me up for 10 years of this and a regular paycheck, and I'll take it.
Give me a steady paycheck. Absolutely.
Exactly. Well, I think at this stage we're about to get stuck in. Why don't we do this? Well, because of with Jitsi, with the recording requirements here, we'll take a break here. And then we'll come back and we'll kind of get stuck in here on American Ninja. Check out my newest release, Nadia and Aiden, available now. Told in a unique dual first-person narration style, Nadia and Aiden explores what it means to be American from the standpoint of 2 kids who grew up in France with an American mother. It also looks at how we define family beyond DNA and blood relations, when life isn't always that simple. You can find Nadia and Aiden on Amazon in paperback, Kindle, and Kindle Unlimited. The link is in the podcast description. All right, we are back, and so we're gonna get stuck in here on American Ninja. So, the movie starts with some on a military base in the Philippines, and we've got some guys doing hacky sack. Now, I don't know, Todd, if you partook in hacky sack at all.
No, I am not coordinated in that way at all. But when that came on, I was just like, "Oh, look at us back in the '80s here doing hacky sack." It's like, could there be anything more '80s?
No, it's funny. So we had this like kind of like, I don't know what you call it, like a hippie kind of shop in downtown Portsmouth where I grew up, and they sold this company. I can't remember what they're called. They're called something Harvest. And I can't remember the name, but they sold hemp products, and they sold a hemp hacky sack. So it was made out of like hemp canvas with hemp seeds in it. And I bought them because I thought they looked cool. And I tried hacky sack because I had the hacky sacks, and I couldn't do it. So people would come into my dorm room in college and see the hacky sack sitting on the thing. I just thought they looked cool. And they're like, "Oh, do you do hacky sack?" And I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm not any good at it." So
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. I did not have the coordination for that at all.
No, and you'd think that probably the American Ninja would, but in fact, here we've got our main character, Joe Armstrong, leaning against a truck, kind of scowling or just kind of staring at the guys playing hacky sack.
Oh, he totally would be good at it, but he's standing there because he's like, well, I know I'd just blow these guys out of the water. It'd be too embarrassing for them, so I'm just gonna not be a part of it. I'm gonna spare them and the embarrassment and just stand here and watch.
Exactly. He's too cool for it. Now, one of the hacky sack players is an actor, Jim Gaines, who's going to be one of the truck drivers. He's going to meet an untimely end here. But Jim Gaines did a lot of exploitation films in the Philippines at this time. So, a lot of like Stereo 8 Santiago directed, Corman produced movies. I think he directed Gary Daniels' first or second movie, The Secret of King Mahi's Island, because the original director left the picture. So interesting seeing him there, Jim Gaines, is one of the hacky sack guys. But we find out that Joe is quite a loner because the hacky sack falls near him and he doesn't even bother to pick it up. He just keeps leaning against the truck there. So Joe is a loner.
He's flipping his knife around too. That's the thing. He's more interested in playing with his knife than he is with doing the hacky sack.
Right. What's not to your point about how Golan Globus thought he was going to be their next big guy. I wonder if they were trying to go for like a James Dean kind of thing with that.
I mean, I can see that. I mean, there is certainly a bit of a resemblance there. I mean, and they definitely kind of, shall we say, skimp on the dialogue. I mean, I was thinking about it. It's funny because, when you were on my show a few weeks ago, we were celebrating Wings Hauser by talking about L.A. Bounty with Sybil Danning. And, Sybil Danning has all of, I think, what did we say, 31 words of dialogue in that movie?
Yes.
I didn't count it for Michael Dudikoff in this, but it's also not a huge amount of dialogue in this movie.
Exactly. I think part 2 he has more, and then when they bring him back for part 4, it goes back to this where it's not a lot of lines. Which when we get to some of those scenes with Judy Aronson, she definitely was not used to acting with somebody who didn't speak a lot. She's definitely doing her best there, but she's having trouble for sure.
Well, I mean, not to jump ahead too much here, but in the moment where they have together, after this attack that's going to happen in a few minutes, I mean, it's almost painfully awkward how she's just, trying to have a little bit of a conversation and maybe get a little bit of some romantic juice flowing here. And he's just quiet. He doesn't say anything.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the acting classes that she took in LA did not go over what you do when you're acting against somebody who doesn't speak. She didn't really know what to do there. Now, we meet Judy Aronson in this scene as well because her dad is the colonel, and he tells the sergeant, "Hey, this is the most important thing to me," which it's weird that you'd feel like you'd have to tell somebody that. Like if you were the colonel and your only family member, your only child is here, it should be a given that that's the most important thing to you, but he still feels like he's got to tell the guy that, "Hey, make sure you protect my daughter."
Yeah. This is the standard thing, isn't it? At least in the world of movies, that, the commanding officer of the base that's tucked away in the Philippines or wherever they happen to be in whatever movie, he's, got a daughter.
Right.
There's not a wife anymore. There's no other family there. It's just the colonel, and he's got a pretty young daughter. And so, of course, pretty young daughter is going to get in trouble in some way. So.
Exactly. That's what happens here. I mean, so she's in a car being driven by the guy who was asking Dudikoff to get to retrieve the hacky sack, and that sergeant is also in the front seat of that car, but she's in the back. And then we've got a motorcade of big trucks bringing a whole bunch of supplies, and we don't know exactly where they need to go, but as they're going through the mountain, we get our opening credit sequence. We get this nice opening song, kind of I think it was kind of like a military kind of music that's playing as we get the credits as these trucks are driving around. So it felt kind of almost like wagon trainish, to be honest.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's just we get some extended shots of random military vehicles driving around. It's it's a good thing to lay the credits over, I guess. You got a lot of big dense foliage there, for the ninjas, spoiler, to hang out in. Ninjas got to hide, so you got to give them some dense foliage.
Exactly. Now, as they're driving, of course, some construction workers pull a construction vehicle out and block the road, and it seems innocuous enough. But of course, this is a canon film; it's a movie called American Ninja, so we know it can't be that innocuous. And of course, our hero, who's driving one of the trucks, he happens to catch out of the rearview window that another truck has pulled him behind to block their exit from going the other way.
Yeah.
So,
did you notice too in this scene that Dudikoff, like you say, he's the last one there. He's in the back. He knows this other thing, but it's obvious something's going to happen because his door is not closed all the way. The door is like flapping open as he's kind of leaning out. So it's like they've already got it unlatched so that he can pop out and start dispatching with the bad guys.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's like all kind of set up exactly for this. And we know we can see his gears are turning, but also I think they kind of sell this other piece about the sergeant being in on it a little heavy here. He's like, you can almost see that he's communicating with the baddies about, just don't say anything, don't do anything, whatever, all this stuff. But Dudikoff, of course, is the fly in this ointment here because as he's taken, he notices that they're trying to take the daughter, they're trying to take Julia Ronson. So he starts attacking. And this inspires the other military soldiers that are there to attack as well. And so they're attacking the rebels, and they beat them all up. And in this process here, somebody almost takes Julia Ronson, and then he takes her. And then there's a guy with a gun who's like shooting. So they kind of escape into the forest together.
Well, we got to mention too. This is that Julia Ronson, tries to, kind of assert her privilege as the general's daughter. She gets in the face of some of the guys with the machine guns and is like, "What are you doing here? Who do you think you are?" And all that. It's like, really, that's not going to work. You're not at the mall, okay?
Exactly. Yeah, they really try to sell that part of it for sure with her, which is we get some interesting stuff coming up here with her when they escape. It's just
she even tries to drive the car off on her own too. She doesn't get very far, but yeah.
That's right, which is a fascinating thing. That it's one of those interesting things with these movies that in her case, right, when she tries to drive the car off and she tumbles it off to the side of the road, it's stable. Right, she's able to get out. She's okay. At other parts in the movie, a car that does that same thing blows up. So
she didn't hit one of the exploding palm trees, I guess.
Exactly. But
well, and two, I mean, Dudikoff. I love his what shall we say, improvisational nature here when it comes to how he starts to take out the bad guys, because he goes for like the tool chest on one of the trucks, and he like first hurls a screwdriver at one of them, which like stabs the guy in the chest, and then I think a crowbar gets thrown in the mix, and then of course the 4-direction lug wrench gets hurled at the guy. It's like, that's the best weapon since the razor blade frisbee and Hard Ticket to Hawaii. Come on.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. speaking of that, because we talk about Uncommon Valor that Dudikoff was in, that had Rod Moss as well. We just, so yeah, think about hard to get away. It all comes back to Rod Moss somehow. But no,
Yeah.
But also I was thinking of Commando, right? When he raids the tool shed, suddenly it's like, oh, I've got a whole bunch of weapons here now. I can just, yeah, it's like this thing where he opens it up and he's, and I think also too, I guess that's supposed to play into the fact that he's not a fully fledged ninja right now. He's just someone who's got these fighting skills, and so he can use weapons at his disposal, but he doesn't have the full ninja arsenal at his disposal yet.
Right. You pick up whatever's there and turn it into a ninja weapon.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so he has, so in the melee and all the mess here, he and Judy Ronson have run off into the jungle to escape these guys, while at the same time the soldiers are beating the rebels, and that's when the ninjas show up. And they just sort of take over the whole thing and start to string everything up. So yeah, the one
ninja's just like standing there watching, he's just like, all right, just gonna let these army guys fight these other guys here for a bit, and then I'll have all the ninjas come out.
Right, we'll call the ninjas what we have to. Yeah, exactly. Now I know on your podcast you do trivia. I have a trivia question for you here. Do you know why ninjas wear black?
No. Why do ninjas wear black?
So this is a fascinating thing. And when Japanese theater were trying to depict ninjas, they would use them. They would have them in black because it would depict them as being invisible. That was the only way they could do the invisible thing. But in reality, ninjas actually would dress like whoever they were infiltrating. So, like, for example, in this case, they would be dressed like soldiers, and the soldiers wouldn't know who to fight against, and then that's how they would infiltrate them. But because of that. Yeah, and I guess like from a Western standpoint, when they were watching these Japanese theater productions of the ninja, that's how they took the black uniform. So that's how we've got the black uniform, is that's from Japanese theater. But yeah, so I will say I used to so you live in Colorado where marijuana is legal, but here in Philadelphia and Pennsylvania it's not. And my wife wanted some gummies, and so I would take buses sometimes out to New Jersey where you could, because if I had a car and we drove, like it wouldn't be so far, but the bus ride was about an hour, and so I'd sometimes have time to kill. And I one time thought I would read up on Wikipedia about ninjas, and so so yeah, while the craziness of a New Jersey bus is going on around me, I'm like learning about how the history of ninjas in there. So
when I've told you before that I have worked as a puppeteer in my past, and a lot of times we dress all in black when we are performing in puppetry, because there are certain forms of puppetry where you are out in front of the, where the audience can see you. But, if you're wearing all black, that's kind of the way to say to the audience, just ignore me. I'm not really there. I guess it's the same way with a ninja. They wear black, and that's like, yeah, you can't see me. I'm hidden. I'm a ninja.
Yeah, that's a good point. That might be it might be a similar tradition for those.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. That's a good point. Yeah. So, but now, of course, we associate. Of course, you think of all these different movies that have these different colored ninjas. I mean, Mortal Kombat, it was like a real easy way for them to add characters, right? You just change the color of the ninja outfit, you've got another ninja there. So
we're going to see that in this movie here in a bit, because we go to the ninja training facility and they've all got different colors on, and I was kind of like, well, what do the different colors mean? What's it mean if you're a blue ninja versus if you're the yellow ninja or the white ninja?
Right, exactly. Which I don't know, actually. I think it's just a way for them to add color to a movie. I don't know. Good point.
Do the red ninjas only have lunch with the red ninjas? Is it forbidden to sit at the yellow ninja table if you're wearing red? I don't know.
Yeah, that could be, or it could be too that like you have to earn your like the way the belts have different colors.
Oh
you
yeah,
earn your way into black ninja. Yeah, so you're not good enough yet. You're just a blue ninja, but eventually you can be a black ninja. Exactly. Well, now we get the jungle sequence here. So initially, like you said, Judy Ronson's character, she's the very privileged princess type woman. She can't even stop talking enough for him to like keep them hidden away from the rebels who are kind of running through here and stuff like that. But they
have the one scene. Did you notice? I called it the Lord of the Rings scene, because it's like they duck behind a bush and the ninjas are all walking behind them and don't see them. It's just like when like Frodo and the other hobbits are ducking under a tree branch or whatever it is, and the Nazgul are there and they don't notice them, and it's like
exactly.
So
Well, 'cause I think this is again with these movies, this idea that if you're a master ninja, the way that Dudikoff is, like all of the tools that the ninja would normally use are useless against you. And so one of them would be their tracking ability, which I don't even know that ninjas had great tracking ability. They were more better at being stealth themselves. But yeah, he's
Here's the thing though. Okay, you got to figure that Judy Aronson's character, I mean, she's all gussied up. She's going through the forest with high heels on, which Dudikoff quickly hacks those off. But
right.
but they're that close to the ninjas. The ninjas are right there. Again, look at that scene from Lord of the Rings. Okay,
Right.
that's the same scene. Surely a woman like her is going to be wearing perfume. You're telling me the ninjas did not smell her perfume?
Right. Especially think about the 80s. It's like, boy, if you walked into like a Macy's or something, even if you avoided that woman who was spraying people as they came in, like the whole store, because I don't know if it was like that. I know the Macy's and like the other department stores in our mall, it was almost like that thing would be first. The perfume counter and all that would be the first thing you walked into.
Yeah. Oh, even at just your regular local drugstore. I worked at a drugstore in my high school years. In the Chicago area, we have the main grocery store is Jewel, and then attached to Jewel is the drugstore, Osco. I worked at Osco. Yeah. Osco has a big cosmetics section. There were 2 aisles that were devoted to the cosmetics and the perfumes and all that stuff. And even that wafted of Debbie Gibson's Electric Youth and stuff like that all day long,
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the ninja outfit, maybe because of the covering, it makes it harder. But you'd think that would be a bad thing. Like, you'd think they would pull it down so they could smell where they're going. So you're right. Yeah, she would have... especially like that time she would have you're right, they should have found her there, but they don't, and so his next thing he does after they kind of they go away, the next thing he does is fix her outfit so it's much more jungle appropriate.
Right.
He rips the heels off of her shoes and then cuts her skirt and turns it into like these shorts kind of things, which I've never seen this in a movie. So to your point about this, they go through all this trouble to say like, oh, her outfit is not functional in the jungle. We need to fix her outfit so it's more functional in the jungle. But they leave the perfume piece out. So it's like they went through all this trouble to be accurate for this thing. Like, I don't know if we would have cared that much if she was going through the jungle in a skirt and heels. We were watching ninjas jump around the forest. I don't think we'd care that much, but they felt like they had to do that.
They had to create a scene where, there's a bit of a adversarial relationship between the two where she's just aghast that, oh, my favorite shoes, and that whole kind of thing. I mean, what are you doing to that dress of mine? Right. That cost me a fortune. And, but then of course they jump in the river too, and then, you have to have a moment where, they both are going to get out of their wet clothes, and that's where the romantic sparks start to fly. I mean, it's literally just a few seconds before, and she hates him, and she can't believe that he's doing all this. And then, next thing you know, when they're getting out of the wet clothes, she's all like, "Hey, you're kind of hunky," and okay,
Yeah, exactly. As a young teenager, right? Just a nice set of abs will do the trick. They zoom in on those abs just so we know. Again, to your point about them trying to sell him as this leading man character, they really kind of go for all that. Like, oh, look at him, with his shirt off, all that kind of hunkiness.
It is kind of surprising that I think this is really the only moment of the film where we get that. I mean, it's not like Van Damme where he's got takes every opportunity to get his shirt off. And, we basically just get this one moment out of Dudikoff here.
Yeah, because the rest of the time it's sort of more just the t-shirt. So, yeah, that's a good point. They kind of just do it here to establish why she would fall for him after being angry with him, which I think it works enough. I mean, I think for all the movies where you kind of wonder, like, why the leading lady is falling for the hero, this actually makes the most sense. Like, it's just like, hey, she thinks he's hot now and he did save her life, so and he's not a bad looking guy, so yeah, it all works.
Strong silent type,
Exactly. Now the other side, back at where the fracas happens, we now have they're kind of going through the aftermath, and they're looking things over. The colonel's like, what the hell happened here? Steve James shows up and has one of the best lines in movie history. He's like, it looks like the work of ninjas, sir.
I mean, it was the 80s. You knew that if there was trouble like this, ninjas. It was
Right.
ninjas.
And the thing is, I think this is something I remember listening to Nicolas Cage talk about doing the what was it the National Treasure movie, where he's like, I'm reading the script and I see this scene where I'm supposed to say to my partner, hey, we're going to steal the Declaration of Independence, and he's like, I know when I'm in a situation like this, I've got to sell it. Like, I've got to go into that scene and sell that my character wants to steal the Declaration of Independence, despite how ridiculous it is. And I guess when you're Steve James, you've got to sell it that this is the work of ninjas, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, he does. I mean, a guy like that tells you it's ninjas, you believe him.
Right. Exactly. So now this is where we find out that the sergeant is probably in on it, because he starts giving a fugazi account of what happened. He makes it sound like it was all Joe Armstrong's fault. It was all his doing that caused this issue. And that, otherwise we would have been okay if he hadn't done this, So now we get the sense, okay, now nobody really likes Joe Armstrong. And he doesn't know what he's coming back to at this point.
Yeah. I want to talk about the sergeant for a second here, because this was the one kind of bit of out there casting of the whole thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think this guy is wonderful. Is this do I get it right? Is this John LaMotta? Is this who
I think so.
this is?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyway, he does not fit a guy. He just does not look like a guy that you go, well, this guy's career military. I mean, look how, how svelte and built this guy is. No, I mean, he looks more like he should be on the commercial going, that's a spicy meatball. It's just not who you think should be the tough sergeant. Or, he looks like maybe he should be like the slightly bumbling, police detective or something like that. It just is not quite right that he would be career military, but still, I mean, for kind of the inside slimy guy, if you got to have a crooked guy in the military ranks, I mean, he does a solid job with it still. So
yeah, I mean, what's another one you could say? Is it maybe the bad Arab stereotype, right? Like, put like a fez on him, and suddenly, he's just in a scene supposed to take place in Egypt, but isn't anywhere near Egypt. He's that guy for you. And like you said, he has the slime, the grease coming off him right away, so everybody should know he's a bad guy. But really, only Dudikoff suspected, which of course he would, but everybody else kind of still thinks he's a great guy, Yeah, and so now I'm trying to remember if I think before Dudikoff makes it back to the base with Judy Ronson, I think we get introduced to our big baddie, Ortega, and we get to see like the whole compound where the ninjas are training, and Ortega's trying to get this big arms deal with these other two guys who are everybody's in suits. It looks like something out of Miami Vice, right? Like like they're doing a big coke deal in Miami Vice with the suits with the thin ties and just
well, and I was trying to figure out, like, where are all these different baddies in the suits from? Because it's kind of a weird international mishmash. Like, you're watching this and you're going, okay, we're in the Philippines. They don't like come out and say, this is an army base in the Philippines, but you've watched enough movies to know this is the Philippines. Okay.
Right.
And we see various, kind of characters around. Of course, we've got ninjas running amok. So, we know we're in that part of the world. But then we have our main bad guy who is he French? I think he's French. It's a little unclear. Then there's other guys that he's working with that you're thinking, I don't know, are they Israeli or something? It is Golan Globus, so maybe they brought some of their buddies to play these parts. I don't know. But the thing is, it's like, it's a villain melting pot here. I mean, I don't know where any of these guys are from.
Right, which was his commentary for these Philippine movies, where it's just like, let's get all the expats we can and have them play whatever parts. I mean, according to the credit sequence, the two guys that are coming to see the big baddie to make the deal, they're listed as older Colombian and younger Colombian. So that's as far as we got there. But you're right, it's Ortega with a French accent, which it's just because that accent is so French, but his name is Ortega. So you get that kind of that mishmash. And then we get introduced also to our big ninja, Tadashi Yamashita, who he has done a good amount of bad actioners as well, especially kind of in that 90s period. A lot of low budget ones. Work with Amir Shervan, who did Samurai Cop. He does Young Rebels with him. Did Dudikoff? I'm sorry, a Gary Daniels movie, Capital Punishment. He also comes back for American Ninja 5. So he's kind of around.
See, I haven't gotten. Is he still the same Black Star Ninja in that one?
No, he's somebody else in that one. He's Tadashi. He actually plays his name. It's somebody named after him, but I don't think it's the same character. Yeah.
We've talked about that too. How a lot of times they just have their own names in these movies.
Exactly. And so I guess he has a star tattoo, which I guess for Golden Globus at that time, they wouldn't think about prison tats and I don't know if in the 80s, is that a thing to get like a teardrop or whatever as a prison tattoo? I think that comes later. I don't know enough about prison tattoos, so I don't.
Now that's just in this movie, right? He doesn't actually have that tattoo.
No,
right?
Exactly. No,
yeah.
they give him that for this movie.
I mean, it looks like it's drawn on with a Sharpie. So.
Exactly. And I mean, can you imagine like with that, just like, the script supervisor having to deal with that probably alone was just like, okay, no, sorry, that you did that scene without the star. Can somebody go draw his star back in? Exactly. But he's doing a demonstration, and this is one of my favorite things about like this 80s, 90s period of these action movies is the baddie killing one of his flock of henchmen.
Right. Yeah. Why would you do that?
Yeah, it's this idea that henchmen are just so easy to get, which I feel like I don't know enough about running a criminal organization, but I feel like you're always probably in the line of trying to get more henchmen. I'm sure it's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, you got to put out a listing on Craigslist for minions, all that kind of stuff. It's not easy for sure.
And the coding.
No, but yeah, I mean, they're clearly putting a lot of effort into training these guys. I mean, like I said, they've all got their own, team outfits, red team, yellow team, black team, all these different guys. And you got all these different things set up around there that they're training with. They've got monkey bars. They've got, got the jump, the springboards. They've got these weird things that are like the punching bags that have spikes coming out of them that they got to run through the gauntlet on, that type of thing. They've clearly invested a lot into ninja training here, so they just randomly off one every now and then.
Right.
And that much that cost you.
Exactly. And the big baddie, of course, after the younger and older Colombian watch this and are kind of a bit aghast at it, he says, "Oh no, that guy, it was an honor for that guy to die by the Black Ninja's hand." And it's like, yeah, okay, well, all right, well, there you go.
The thank you card is in the mail already, I assure you.
Exactly. So we've established we've got big baddies, ninjas, scary ninjas. How is our hero going to be able to defeat them? We come back to the base, and on one of those like kind of cutesy like kind of van kind of things that drive people around in the Philippines. They've hitched a ride on one of those back to the army base, and as they're standing there together, Judy Aronson's doing her best to act opposite Michael Dudikoff, who's just staring at her. He definitely finds her attractive, but he's not really saying much, and so she's just like, thank you so much. Oh, I appreciate it. Okay, is he going to kiss me? Okay, it doesn't look like he's going to. Oh, I look like a mess, don't I? No, you look great. Okay, great. And finally she just decides, I'm just going to go for it. And she just kisses him on the cheek and calls it good. But it's a very awkward scene. I guess it was meant to be awkward, but we're not used to that in these action movies. Usually, even if the scene is awkward, the hero's playing it cool and, kind of going for it, but he's not playing it cool here.
Well, I mean, Michael Dudikoff, I mean, God bless the man, but he's not got the most expressive face, so I mean, even if he was just like a bundle of raging hormones after she kissed him on the cheek, you'd never know it because he just kind of just stays the same stoic expression in that. And then, of course, after that scene, he's got to go in and chat with the colonel and all that stuff. He gets summoned to the colonel's office, basically, which you expect is going to be like the, stay away from my daughter type of a thing here, What I love about the colonel's office is the huge picture of Ronald Reagan behind his desk. He's also got a much smaller picture of his own daughter there, but there's a huge Reagan picture on the wall.
Yes, exactly. Now, I have a thing on my site where I collect those, and I actually haven't gotten the presidential portrait for Reagan from this movie in there. So I've got to add that photo to my review of this, because I actually have a tag for presidential portraits. So at this point, I've got Reagan, Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 42. So I'm hoping like it would be nice if some movies that took place in Vietnam had a Nixon, if I could get a Nixon or a Carter.
Yeah.
But then also for the later ones, to see, like, I don't even think I've had an Obama yet. I don't think I've seen maybe.
No,
yes.
I don't think I've seen that either. But
yeah.
I mean, imagine the days where it'll be kind of funny when we get to the days where you got Biden ones in the background and things like that. But
exactly.
I mean,
I almost feel like they don't do it as much in new movies as they did in the past. Like, it seems like in these 80s
it's more
movies,
divisive now, isn't it?
Right.
It's like as soon as you see something on there, half the audience is going to go, well, we know where the filmmaker's politics lies here,
Right. Because in this movie, you could have a picture of Reagan on the wall there, and it could go either way, right? It could be Golan Globus saying, hey, we're fans of Reagan, but it also could be like, no, Reagan is showing us who our this colonel really is, right? It could be a reflection on who he is. And
he was the president at the time the movie was made. Right. So,
Well, that's the other piece of it. Yeah, is they want to show it's a government office, so have a picture of the president on the wall.
Right. Yeah. You know who else gets a big portrait in this movie too? And this is jumping to the end.
Yes.
But the colonel, I mean, clearly, he loves a couple of things more than his own daughter, because he's got a bigger picture of Ronald Reagan on the wall. And then at the end of the movie, not in his office, but in his own home, he's got a huge picture of John Wayne on the wall.
Right. Exactly. So I think we're getting a sense of why he said to the sergeant, she's the most important thing to me. Because again, if you really,
than Ronald Reagan and John Wayne.
Exactly. It's like, if you really cared about your daughter that much, you wouldn't need to say it, right? It's just implied that, well, it's my daughter. Of course I care. So he's like doing it for her sake, to show her. And she's, I mean, that picture of her, it's like, I think they got something from her when she was maybe in high school in like a few years, like maybe like late 70s. Like, because the hair is definitely like when we did King of the Mountain for your podcast, it's kind of Deborah Van Valkenburg's hair from, And so that's the picture. But like you said, it's almost like, it's kind of funny. It's like that was probably the best picture they could get for her for the movie. But it's like, oh, let's just put that there. Then we'll have this huge Reagan that we've got here over there as well. Exactly. Yeah.
Personally, I'd sooner put a picture of Judy Aronson than Reagan or John Wayne on my wall.
I know. From a budget standpoint, they couldn't just have a photographer take a picture. Well, I guess they wanted to be an older picture. I guess nowadays you could really like do it just like a modern picture and then age it and make it look like it was from the 70s much better.
Yeah. Like, while we're on the subject of pictures too, kind of jumping forward to a scene here coming up. I guess it kind of comes next, but this is where we start to get Dudikoff going back to the barracks, and they're kind of giving him a hard time and stuff. And what's with the stuff on the walls in the barracks too? Because there's like they've got posters and things up there. I think I even read in the trivia, I think one of the posters is like a pretty rare poster of Kiss.
Wow.
From like their no makeup era, something like that. But in my notes, I was just like, well, who's that heavy metal band? But I guess according to some stuff, it's Kiss. But then, of course, you've also got like girly posters and things like that. But a bunch of them, these posters have randomly these like, I don't know if they're like bumper stickers or what, but just like these stickers on them with the word Simpson, which I don't know what that's supposed to be, who they're advertising here. We've talked about advertising other times on your show here. We talked about like, what was the drink that was in that one movie we talked about, Deadly Prey, the New York iced tea or whatever, Right,
yes.
So I don't know what product Simpson is, what kind of, like product promo money they got out of that. But I mean, the name is all over the posters in the barracks here, but I don't have a clue what it is.
Yeah, it's again with Golan Globus, because you think of some of those movies like what was a teenage, was it Last Teenage Virgin or Last American Virgin,
they did Last American Virgin, which was a remake of what do they call that movie? It's I can't remember it. I mean, it's pretty much a straight on remake of an Israeli film.
Popsicle. Right, Lemon Popsicle.
Right, yeah, Lemon Popsicle. That's it.
Yeah, and I think there's this thing especially with Menachem Golan, where growing up in Israel, he doesn't always get American culture. It's funny because you see it differently when you watch Godfrey Ho ninja movies, where like you've got like Richard Harrison talking on a Garfield phone, and it's just like Godfrey Ho hearing that Garfield was popular in America, so let's do that. But it is one of those things where like Golan Globes probably didn't know exactly what like young men would be into in America at that time, but he had a sense of what he thought it was. And so he just had Furstenberg like put all this stuff. I mean, and Furstenberg might have been in a similar situation. He's also from Israel, I believe. And so it's interesting how you sometimes see American culture reflected, kind of like filtered through their Israeli understanding of it in these movies. And I think this is another example of that.
I'm actually kind of jumping back here because I have the movie on my screen here as we've been talking, trying to sync up with the scenes we've been talking about. And I just froze on a shot of Michael Dudikoff. And yes, behind him, you can see this poster. And if you look closely, you can tell it is Kiss, because at the bottom of the poster, there are little album covers. And you can see like the Creatures of the Night album cover and things like that. But yeah, if the figures standing on there, they've got these stickers that say Simpson going across the faces, so you can't see Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley and those guys. Oh. But
is that what it was? Weird. I mean, even at that time, right? Kiss were pretty litigious about their branding and everything. Mm-hmm. I think, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah.
It might have been one of those things where you couldn't use their likeness in a movie, even in a poster that would technically have been advertising them. Because I like Gene Simmons. Don't they have like Kiss like branded like coffins and things like that?
They've got Kiss branded everything. I mean, I'll have to ask our mutual friend Richard Kirkham, who hosts the Lambcast, because Richard is the biggest Kiss fan I know. Nice. He goes to every Kiss event. He's been on the Kiss cruises, things like that. So I'll have to ask him about this poster sometime.
Yes, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Yeah, because this was that period, right? The no makeup period where they were essentially a hair band. I mean, they had that album that had Forever, which I like that song. It's a good ballad, but they were Poison, Whitesnake. They were right in with that. And then they kind of, as the 90s went on, they're like, well, let's just put our makeup back on and be Kiss again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I remember, it was a big deal when they did the whole unmasking Kiss thing on MTV and stuff like that. That was huge.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So maybe this is a good truth because, Dudikoff is being given a hard time. We can tell that nobody likes him. And, the guy who's leading the motorcade, he's telling Steve James that, hey, that's Joe Armstrong. He's the guy that did all this horrible stuff. So, eventually James is like, when Dudikoff's working on a car, James shows up and is like, hey, let's essentially he starts egging him on and they get into a fight. And the fight is pretty much just Steve James lunging at Dudikoff and Dudikoff throwing him around.
Right.
And he's just throwing them all over the place. Now I read that Dudikoff, because he didn't know martial arts before he did this movie, he was actually, it's in the IMDb preview as well. He was nervous about doing any kind of scenes like this with Steve James. And I think James was also not happy about the fact that Dudikoff was the lead in a movie where he felt like he should be, the American Ninja.
I mean, it's a scene that both works and it doesn't, because on the one hand, it's a nice little, somewhat playful fight sequence. But I guess, if you're going to establish that this guy is a ninja type of warrior who, maybe he doesn't look as intimidating as some guys, but he's gonna surprise you with the skills that he has hidden under the surface there. I mean, this scene does that. But then at the same time, you look at Dudikoff and you look at Steve James in this same shot, and you go, well, it's no contest. Steve James going to turn this guy into mush, but that's not the way it works.
No, exactly. I mean, I can't imagine him throwing Steve James. It's just like, no matter how good he is at martial art. I mean, I imagine because like a judo throw, when somebody's doing a judo hold, it's not so much that they throw somebody up in the air who's that big. They use like leverage and kind of like use their hips and things like that to kind of topple them over, as opposed to just being like, oh, I'm just going to throw you over my shoulder. He would land on Dudikoff and collapse on him, and that would be it there. So, yeah. And then go ahead.
I was gonna say I like the bit in this fight sequence with the bucket where
Yes.
Dudikoff puts the bucket on his head, and basically it's like Luke Skywalker with the blast shield down, fighting the probe.
Exactly. And you wonder too, again, that if whether that was Furstenberg or Golan Globus who are like pulling from those kinds of things, because you're right, it's like almost identical to that.
Yeah.
Though I guess maybe too, like Lucas might have pulled it from, martial arts movies that may have done the same, because he pulled a lot of stuff from
Yeah.
like,
Oh,
so
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of this feedback loop, right? Or maybe it's like a multi, the inspiration spawns multiple things. Yeah, it's always interesting with that kind of thing. But you're right, it's like a fun moment because it's like you hear all the guys in the background, like all the ADR of like, yeah, he can't see you, man, go for it, get him, man, get him, and it's like, we all know what's going to happen there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he kind of like, James has like a respect for him because he beat him, and then the sergeant shows up and is like, "No, this man's bad news." And Steve James is like, "No, he, we were doing a demonstration for everybody." That's like the whole like,
Oh,
remember,
yeah.
if the guy's bigger, you can get him off guard. Use his, whatever, and all this stuff. And, but no, he just gets into more trouble.
Oh, I almost forgot too. Is this the scene where, as part of the fight, Dudikoff uses the garden hose?
Yes, he kind of strangles him and stuff with the garden hose.
Yeah. I was like, Golan and Globus should have capitalized on that and done like Garden Hose Ninja as a whole movie. That would have been great.
Well, because like recently we had Robert Bronzy, the Charles Bronson lookalike, in a movie called
Right.
Gardener. You could have had a gardener where he's, the cover would have been Bronson holding a hose, right, and just being like, because Charles Bronson would have been great in that role. Is that
Oh, I got to see this gardener thing because I'm like, this is basically direct to video attempt at like the Beekeeper type of a thing.
Exactly. So it came out before the Beekeeper, but it's like, it's direct to video. That Robert Bronzy guy playing a Bronson-esque character. Gary Daniels plays the bad guy, and then also it's all of these English UK actors playing Americans, and I don't know why, but they're Americans living in the UK, and it's like, I don't know why they had to be Americans, because it's like, for whatever reason they did. I know these actors. I think it maybe part of the selling point for some of these actors is like, hey, you get to try out your American accent and put it on your demo reel, I guess is what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
absolutely.
It's been a hard movie to find. Like, it kind of comes on and off of Prime. But it is a fun one. Gary Daniels is a great baddie in it for sure. And the Bronzy guy is a trip. He doesn't speak English well, so it kind of like Dudikoff here. They don't give him a lot of lines, but he doesn't use a garden hose either, which is kind of a disappointment after seeing this.
I got to check this one out. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I swallowed a gulp some air there.
Right, no
but
worries.
no, I've put a bunch of these Bronzy movies on my list. I just haven't gotten to them yet because I'm so enamored with the concept that this guy is, becoming a direct-to-video star just because he looks so much like Charles Bronson.
I know, it's such a crazy. The world of direct-to-video, and again, like Dudikoff, who we're talking about here, is kind of a fantastic version of this too, because he does canon movies, and then Andrew Stevens, who I was talking with Richard Haas from DTV Digest, he was saying how Stevens was trying to kind of build his own canon, essentially, Andrew Stevens, with his production companies, and he kind of picks up Dudikoff after Canon folds, and he makes a bunch of direct-to-video movies with him. And so it's kind of funny how these characters, these actors, sort of get into these things. But like looking like Charles Bronson is kind of enough of a thing, right, to get you into direct-to-video movies.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, so Dudikoff gets into more trouble, but then we're starting to get some pieces about how things are going here. So we're finding out that our main baddie is not happy about this American ninja, Tadashi Yamashita, the Black Star Ninja. He's let it be known that, hey, this is an American doing ninja techniques. We don't really know why. Westerners aren't supposed to learn the way of the ninja. So, but the
cultural appropriation in the 80s, he's mad about it already.
Exactly. Somehow he knows. We've got this mysterious gardener, mysterious Japanese gardener who's been coming up in some flashbacks, because one of the things we've discovered about Dudikoff's character is he has amnesia. He doesn't remember his childhood. So we don't know what's going on there. But there's a sense of like, we got to get rid of this guy. We got to, the baddies want to get rid of him. So the sergeant gives him a job of like bringing some stuff to like another location. And when he does, he gets ambushed. And of course, he takes everybody out. Now I'm trying to think, is this, no, does he go on the date after this?
I think the date is first.
That's right.
Yeah, which is weird because just a few minutes ago, all the other guys in the barracks, hated Dudikoff. There was a fight going on, and he shows his skills against Stephen James, and so now suddenly they all love him, and they're setting him up with Judy Aronson.
Right, because Aronson is supposed to be going somewhere, and she tells that the driver guy, who again is the one that sold Dudikoff out to James, she tells him, she says, I've got another plan. Can you help me out here? And then the other thing too, I forgot, is that James is going to Dudikoff saying, hey, we could do demonstrations and make a lot of money, which I guess that's similar to like those things that Steven Seagal does, where he beats the crap, breaks people's arms and stuff, or whatever it is. Yeah. And Dudikoff's like, I don't want any part of that. I'm not doing that, And so it kind of makes James's character look hokey. Which fortunately in the later movies he kind of recovers from that, but yeah, so they set up this date thing, and so he goes on the date with her, and while they're on the date, he sees the sergeant with Ortega, the baddie, and Judy Aronson's like, oh no, this is great. No, Ortega, he's my dad's old friend. The sergeant, he's a big teddy bear. You won't get in trouble for being out with me with him, which of course is not how it works. And so, but they have their moment
at the restaurant with all the wicker chairs. It's the wicker chair restaurant.
Exactly. Yeah, it's and I feel like that restaurant has been in a lot of these movies. So I wonder if it's just like some set that like, I don't know if Roger Corman owned a production studio there, or somebody had something in Manila, and they were just like, this is the set, and it's just we got a good deal on wicker chairs.
All the best restaurants in the Philippines have wicker chairs. That's the way it goes.
Exactly. And the other thing I forgot too is that he was driving Steve James's sport bike, and so of course he jumps over the wall to do it.
Which, why does he even have it there in the first place? I mean, seriously, just I don't know what rank Stephen James' character is, but they seriously let you bring your fancy red motorcycle if you're you're stationed at some base in the Philippines? You really get to bring that kind of stuff with you?
Right. He was listed as sergeant, though apparently the other sergeant outranks him. So he's like I don't know if they're different classes of sergeant, but yeah, or was he corporal? Maybe he was corporal, actually.
I don't remember, but still, regardless, I don't even think the big 5-star general gets to bring his motorcycle to the Philippines. I mean, what's it going to cost to get it there in the first place?
Right. Or I guess if he bought one there, but again, same thing. Like you're making that much money, you buy a sport bike. He's doing. I guess that makes sense. Maybe in that sense, that because if you're in the military, there you're getting your money, but then you don't have a lot of expenses, right? Because you're eating at the mess hall, you have to pay rent.
Well, no, you're not just eating at the mess hall. You got to go to the wicker chair restaurant. Come on.
Exactly. Taking dates in the wicker chair restaurant. Exactly. No. So now this
everybody goes to the wicker chair restaurant. I still just can't even get over the fact that the other guys are all like, yeah, we're gonna help you, get hooked up with Michael Dudikoff here. I mean, she's the only woman on the base. She's this pretty young thing. You'd think all these guys would be like, heck no, I'm not helping Michael Dudikoff go to the wicker chair restaurant with her. I want to take her to the wicker chair restaurant. Come on.
Exactly. Now, I mean, the other thing too, right? It's the colonel's daughter, so I don't know if like she's off limits. But then because even Steve James is like, oh, she's hot, right? And it looks like she likes you, and I guess Steve James's case, he's a little bit older, so maybe he doesn't care so much,
Right,
but you're right. The younger guys, they'd be like, oh, we want our shot with her. So exactly. Now we get their moment together, right? They go back to her. He drops her off at her place. The colonel's still out, so she's got the place to herself, and she invites him inside. And when they have their kiss, the music playing in the background is like old Hollywood kiss, romantic moment music. I think it was really interesting, the choice for that.
Yeah, I mean and it's a scene that, I mean, it's a little uncomfortable because clearly she's kind of trying to be like, hey, come on, let's go inside, and it fades off as they're kissing, so we don't really know if they spent the night together. It's kind of implied that they do, but again, you're kind of, it's a moment that makes you go, all right, well, what exactly is the dynamic here? Is she, how young is the colonel's daughter? Again, we just saw her playing a high school student in another movie the same year.
Right.
But yeah, you kind of, out of this moment, let's assume that they did spend the night together. You're kind of then wanting, things to be upped when it comes to the, hands off my daughter type of a thing with the colonel. You want that going. You want the colonel to start making life miserable for Michael Dudikoff, but it doesn't go that way.
Right. Well, because there is kind of like that college walk of shame thing where the next morning, he's in his uniform that he was wearing on the date. He's in bed in that uniform. So there's that sense that, yeah, he spent the night in his, so he just got back in time in his clothes and didn't get a chance to change, and he was sleeping. And that's when the sergeant comes in, the mustachioed bad guy sergeant.
Yeah.
And
the spicy meatball guy.
The spicy meatball guy. And he gives Dudikoff the assignment to bring the truck. And that's when the ambush happens. He is able to fight off all of these ninjas and all these bad guys in the warehouse area, but the baddies make off with the truck. And so it's his word against the sergeants on what happened to this truck. And no, he lost the truck. So now he's going to be court-martialed, and he ends up in the military prison for this. We get a little bit of From Here to Eternity, right? With what was that? Ernest Borgnine, right? And Frank Sinatra. Though nobody beats him up or anything like that, but yeah.
See, now you got me going, oh, there should have been a love scene on the beach.
Exactly.
But,
right, with Burt Lancaster, right? Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this movie could have used some Burt Lancaster for sure. Yeah.
Oh, can you imagine Burt Lancaster as the colonel in this movie?
Oh, boy, beautiful. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so he's in the military prison, and this is where the sergeant and he talks to Ortega. Ortega talks to Yamashita, and Yamashita's like, "I'll go in and I'll kill him. I'll go into the military prison, I'll infiltrate it, and I'll kill him." And unfortunately, he kills all of the military policemen who are guarding the place, but he doesn't kill Dudikoff. Dudikoff escapes. One of those military policemen is the recently deceased Richard Norton. He gets strangled by gets his throat slit by Yamashita. So that's just a kind of a cute fact there. But yeah, unfortunately, he just passed away recently, Richard Norton. Yeah,
is this the sequence too where there's just like an awful lot of conveniently placed ladders?
Yes, ladders are everywhere. People are climbing everywhere. I mean, also the fact that the ninja, of all the ninja toolkit, right, of all the things that you have in your ninja toolkit, wire cutters are in there. Because
well, we later find out that this particular ninja has a practical Batman utility belt because in the final fight, he whips out a whole bunch of things and you're just going, where did that come from?
Right, exactly. And the funny thing, too, is, again, going back to the traditional understanding of what ninjas were, in reality, like, had this been, kind of the real understanding of ninjas, he would have been dressed like a military police officer and infiltrated that way. That's exactly, that's what it would have been. But of course, this is the 80s. We get the really cool black ninja outfit, and he's just kind of, dancing around, popping out of nowhere, killing people. And Dudikoff escapes, and he finds Steve James and Judy Ronson, and he's like, "Hey, listen, we need to go. We got to stop Ortega. We got to go do this." And Steve James is like, "No, the colonel is still a good guy. I think we should go and tell him all this stuff, and trust us. He'll believe it, And Dudikoff's like, "All right, I guess that's what we'll do then." Which ends up not being the right move. But this isn't where we see the great John Wayne picture. It's later, because they go to the house.
Yeah.
And the colonel's like, "I don't know if I can believe this. The sergeant's a really good man. I really, I trust him and all that stuff." And then he calls to find out what happened. And that's when they tell him, like, "Oh, Dudikoff killed all the military police officers. He's the one who he killed them all and escaped," which makes a lot of sense, right? If you were someone who killed a bunch of military police officers, of course, the first thing you do is go to the colonel and tell him that it was a conspiracy, right? You wouldn't just try to escape and run away and go AWOL. But the military police officers show up and they try to arrest Dudikoff, and fortunately, the window that he has, it's made out of like cedar lattice, and he just able to jump through very easily.
He leaps through it. I mean, Dudikoff does a lot of leaping. There's several moments. I mean, right from the beginning of the film where he's like dramatically leaping out of, from, something that's going to blow up or something. But yeah, he does this full on belly flop out of this window, jumps in the Jeep and then, he gets chased. And we get some pretty fun moments here. I mean, the sequence with this chase is fun in its cheesiness, but also in some of the things that happen. I mean, I love we have all these cutaway shots of the spicy meatball sergeant in the car and the military policeman driving it, and it's clearly just they're against a black background and somebody's shaking the Jeep so that it looks like they're driving. And at one point he pushes his driver out because he's like, let me drive, and he pushes the guy out and he's driving along. And there's a bit where one of the Jeeps crashes into a tree, and whenever they shot this, it must have just rained or something, because you can see the street is all wet and such, but he crashes into the tree and just like all the branches, all the water shakes off the branches, so you just got like this downpour of rain that falls onto the Jeep. And I was kind of like, well, that's kind of a cool accident, the way that happens there. And then, of course, we get a magical exploding palm tree that leads to the sergeant's demise.
Exactly. The other thing too about the chase, I don't know if this kind of you had the sense of this too. It felt like they were using like old car chase from like the 40s, like an old like Humphrey Bogart or Cagney film where you just have the cars and you speed up the film. It felt like that's how the cars were chasing each other. It was almost like they were just going at normal speed, but then they sped the film up to look like the Jeeps were going faster. Yeah.
It's it does feel got a little bit of a silent movie vibe with that.
So now we have our damsel in distress moment. So Ortega is now downstairs. Everybody has left the colonel's place. Ortega is downstairs talking to the colonel, and the colonel's like, "Hey, we got to call this whole thing off. This American ninja guy is causing too many problems. We got to call this whole thing off." And Ortega's like, "No, I'm standing to make $4 million from this. I'm not giving. I'm not going to give that up." At the same time, Yamashita is upstairs on the second floor, kidnapping the daughter. And so he's kidnapping the daughter at that moment, and then of course that's when we get that sequence where the colonel is standing kind of in his doorway, and over his shoulder is this beautiful matte painting of John Wayne.
Yeah, it's the Duke is just watching over the whole sequence here. I mean, you almost want to see a little tear fall from the painting's eye as he's watching this great American colonel fall and be doing business with these shady characters. The Duke would be disappointed. He's also got, did you notice there's like these cowboy hats just randomly hanging on the wall as well?
Yes, exactly. It's like, instead of like having them in like in a closet or something, he's just got them displayed,
It's like it's art or something like that.
Right, exactly. So this is the big reveal that the colonel is in on it. The colonel is part of this whole scheme to sell these weapons to these Colombians. And so now it's time for our big denouement, right? And so the deal is about to happen, right? They're about to, actually, before we get to the denouement, Michael Dudikoff, he's trying to infiltrate the baddie's lair, and the gardener shows up. And we discover from the gardener that, hey, I'm the one who trained you in the art of ninjutsu. And we see this kid in this like kind of like Japanese, kind of half Japanese get up, like shooting bow and arrows and things like that. And that's how he learned all of his skills. And the gardener gives him all of the ninja tools that he needs. So he's finally wearing the ninja mask. Now, interesting thing in the trivia is that Chuck Norris was offered this role, and he turned it down because he didn't want to be wearing a ninja mask. He didn't want to have his face obscured for the movie. But I mean, it's really only this last 15 minutes of the movie that he wears the actual ninja mask. So we saw plenty of Dudikoff's face from this movie. So Chuck Norris would have been okay in this, but I think it's better with Dudikoff.
Mm-hmm. We should also mention the gardener is John Fuchioka. I probably didn't say that right, but anyway, one of those guys that you see him and you go, "Oh, he's in everything," and as you look down the list of the filmography, bunch of TV shows, bunch of movies. You know, he's in Midway, he's in Future World, he's in the Octagon. You know, it's just one of those guys that you just go, oh yeah, that guy always is playing a wise old martial arts expert type of guy. You know,
exactly. Yeah, and here he is. Yeah, he's here, giving all the goods to Dudikoff. So we get the big moment where he's got his suit on, he's got his full ninja get up with the weapons and everything. He's shown all the weapons. Here's the shuriken, the sword, the sai, all of that stuff. So no longer does he need to raid tool sheds, right? He's now got a full arsenal of ninja weapons. And
it is interesting though that how many times, I can't think of another time where it's like, the good guy is going in, you think it's the final, thing. He's going to the enemy compound. He's going to save the girl, all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly it stops because he meets the Obi-Wan type of a character. And he's like, all right, I got to train you on a few things. And we basically get, where, they're doing a little bit of training and whatnot in the enemy's compound itself. It's like,
right. He had done such a great job of ingratiating himself to Ortega that Ortega never suspected that his gardener was the ninja trainer who trained. Yeah. So it's hilarious that you're right. This is I don't think we'll ever. You almost never. I would say almost never. I don't think you've ever seen this before. That he's being trained while he's infiltrating. He's being trained in there. So. So now we've got our big final moment here. So they're about to finish the deal, right? They're about to finish the deal. We got our younger and older Colombian there. It's the next day, so it's nice and bright outside, and the ninjas are all there. Everything's about to happen. The helicopter's shown up, and as they're about to make the deal, Dudikoff emerges, and he starts shooting arrows at people. Tadashi Yoshida's catching the arrows, and then they bring out Judy Aronson. Hey, we've got your girl here. You better give up or whatever. So all of that kind of stuff is happening, and I don't know what older and younger Colombian are thinking about at this point. They're just like, wait a second, this is not how we expected this to go.
I mean, they're just kind of standing there staring at the show because, if I was standing there and things started to unfold the way they unfold in this movie, I probably would be at a loss for words too. I mean, when Michael Dudikoff, pops out in the full ninja outfit, he leaps out of the bushes and then starts doing this dramatic thing with the, what do they call those electro weapons? The ones Jennifer Garner used, the scythes or whatever they call them. Yeah. And so, he's twirling those around and all that. And then Black Star Ninja sees him there. He's standing right next to Judy Aronson. Instead of just whipping out his knife and holding it to her throat, he does a dramatic backflip in the air, jumps behind her, then pulls out the knife and holds it to the throat. So it's kind of like they're instantly kind of trying to one up each other from the start. It's like, oh yeah, you're doing a fancy move. Well, look at this fancy move, all that stuff. And I imagine all the other, random villains standing there just going, what the heck? Where's the popcorn? They're just, stand there and watch this thing unfold.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but what's funny is they have this advantage, right? Where it's like, hey, you should just turn in all your weapons or whatever, or we'll kill her. But for whatever reason, they're just like, once you throw the size down, okay, we're going to send our ninjas in to kill you now. And so, of course, he's surrounded by ninjas, and we think, well, how's he going to beat all these ninjas at once? Well, fortunately, some smoke is thrown on the ground, and then Fujioka appears with him. Well, 2 against 20 is much better odds than 1 against 20. So,
yeah. But I mean, we all know in the world of ninja movies, the two guys are easily going to take out 20, 30 other guys. That's just the way that it works. It is a little bit, I mean, I kind of wanted it to be like the whole rainbow colors of the different ninjas we saw in training, because basically everybody here is wearing black. They all look the same, with the exception of the Obi-Wan ninja is got red pants on. Other than that, they all look the same. I think maybe you can spot Dudikoff. I think maybe Dudikoff's wearing like a red belt and the others aren't, but still, otherwise it's just a sea of black. Yeah. So even though the moves are cool, there's not a lot of well, it's difficult to tell who the good guys and who the bad guys are.
Exactly. This is the point we needed our United Colors of Ninja Benetton moment.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Now, as they're taking out ninjas, are the soldiers show up, led by Steve James, and so he's got like this big gun. He's got his tank top with like he's got the big bandana, and everything, and he's
this is his Rambo moment. I mean,
yeah.
yeah.
It's beautiful. He's just mowing guys down. Eventually, he gets out of the Jeep. He starts beating people up. There's like this big Bolo Young like guy that he fights.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, there's a moment where he punches him in the face and it doesn't do anything. He's like, oh, man. What is he like? Oh, geez, or something like that. Or I can't remember. But
I seriously, when I in my notes, I said, oh, yeah, it's Bolo's twin. Seriously, this guy could have played Bolo's brother in a movie.
Yeah. What's funny about with the second movie is Steve James's moment is in the blind beggars bar fight, and like the later part where it's kind of like this scene here, it's not as much fun. He's not as much fun. Like this is his best moment here, where he's just like he's going around and just beating guys up left and right, taking people out. I think Furstenberg sees something in him here where he's like, I got to put him in more movies. The other thing I read was that a lot of the dialogue. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say this is the scene. I mean, already I enjoyed Steve James throughout the movie, but this is the scene where it's the big finish, and yeah, you're supposed to be focused on Dudikoff and rooting for Dudikoff, but at the same time, you watch this and you go, man, why didn't they give Steve James more to do in this movie? If this is what we're going to get here at the ending, you've wasted this guy,
Right, and I wonder because, like, to your point about them wanting to make Dudikoff into their next big thing, and if they felt like, well, we got to make this his movie, and Furstenberg watches this and says, well, no, when we do the second one, it's going to be a partnership, it's going to be a buddy film where everybody gets equal amounts. But this time it was like, okay, I'm going off of what Golan Globus want here. I'm going to make it the way they want it. But he realizes like it's not good. I mean, the other thing too is like, according to the trivia, Steve James wrote a lot of his dialogue. So a lot of the things that he says, like there's that one scene where the guy's driving the Jeep and he's like, I'm going to take us uptown, meaning they're going to go up the stairs or whatever. and he just goes, take me home, baby, take me home. And it's like, yeah, so great. So we got that fun stuff happening. And then we finally get our big finale, or our big kind of one-on-one fight between Dudikoff and Yamashita.
Oh man! Yeah. Oh boy!
I mean, the weapons that we get here. I mean, obviously it's cords, it's throwing stars, it's all this stuff, but also lasers.
Ninja laser. I loved it. Well, and there's a flamethrower. I was giddy enough when the flamethrower comes out. He's like, I mean, it's literally like out of a Mortal Kombat video game where he just like does a punch and the flames come out. It's like, oh wow. But then when there's ninja laser, I was just like, I'm in heaven now. This is great.
Yeah, and it's just like, how does Dudikoff defeat this? But fortunately, he is able to eventually. I mean, they're fighting on the roof, they're fighting on the ground, they're jumping up and down things, they're climbing. I mean, like you said, like the flamethrower thing. It's like when they're climbing the rope, and because we've established all of these things, like the whole ninja training compound, we've established that all of these things are things that Dudikoff can handle. So like, there's like the swinging bamboo things with the spikes on them that he's dodging,
which they could have easily avoided. I mean, there's plenty of space to go around that, but no, they ran right through it.
He had to run through it, exactly. And then he's like climbing the rope, and Yamashita burns the rope, so he has to like kind of jump above where the flame is so he can keep climbing up. It's almost like Dudikoff is having to go through the ninja training course to defeat Yamashita. But as he's doing it, the baddie is taking Judy Aronson with him, and the colonel shows up to confront the baddie. It's almost like he's finally had a change of heart. And I do kind of wonder in that opening sequence where the daughter is almost kidnapped there, if maybe the colonel was in on it and was just kind of like, yeah, just take my daughter as long as you don't hurt her. I'm okay with you kidnapping her for the purpose of this. And now he's having a change of heart, and he's like, no, I don't want you to hurt my daughter. But,
if her picture had been as big as Reagan's on his wall, then maybe he wouldn't have done that. But she's got a little picture, Reagan's got a big picture, so he's okay with her getting ending up being a part of this whole thing and getting kidnapped.
Exactly. And so yeah, so of course, because he was a baddie, and even though he's having a change of heart, it's a little too late for the change of heart, and Ortega shoots him and he's dead. So he's killed. Also, younger and older Colombian, they try to escape when they see this whole thing going bad, and Ortega shoots them in the back. And their death scenes, they're like kind of like an 80s like music video directed by Russell Mulcahy, where people are kind of walking funny or something, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of wonderful, kind of crazy deaths in this moment because, I mean, this is the last time you were on my show, you talked about the shimmy death.
Yes.
And I don't know, this movie could hold a record for shimmy deaths. There are so many shimmy deaths here in this final sequence, and some of them are like, you could tell these random actors from the Philippines really have put a lot of work into developing their craft with the shimmy death, while there's others of them who are, clearly still, in training when it comes to the shimmy death. So.
Right, because especially when James comes in with the big gun on top of the Jeep and he's just mowing guys down. It is just like, but also the soldiers come in with with M16s and they're mowing guys out. And like you said, there's like shimmies. There's shimmies that lead into falls from heights and stuff. According to IMDb, it said the death count on this, or the kill count, is like 115 or something like that.
Mm.
And most of it comes here at the end. Most of that number is here. So we get all of this. Everybody's, at this point, it's really just Ortega trying to escape in the helicopter with Judy Aronson. And Dudikoff is not going to let that happen. Fortunately, there's like a kind of like a bar on the front of the helicopter that is just perfect for an acrobat to jump on. And so it's like the parallel bars or something. He just jumps onto that. He's like hanging and he kind of goes up. And then, the baddie is not really doing a good job of reaching out to shoot him. The helicopter's in the air. But I don't know about you, but I thought of Will from Exploding Helicopter in this sequence here.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as soon as the helicopter showed up, I was going, oh, well, we know what's going to happen here.
Because the helicopter takes off, and then Steve James goes to the back of a Jeep and pulls out this big rocket launcher thing with a sight and all of it. I mean, it looks like a gadget that was like invented just for this movie, just for this one sequence here. And he's putting the whole thing together as the helicopter is going up in the air. So it's like you get this anticipation. And then he starts to train the thing on the helicopter, and he's like, Joe, get out of there, Joe, get out of there. Jump out, and so it's like this anticipation where, and I guess, at this point for Will, if he's seen enough of these, he probably knows this is going to go the way it's going to go, that they wouldn't really pull the rug out from under him. But there's that little moment of like, are they really going to do it, or are they just going to set it up and not do it?
Yeah. Well, because you keep on going, well, how's he going to get off of this thing with the girl, because
Right.
he's got to jump, either they're going to land the thing or he's got to jump. And, we're wanting him to jump because we want the helicopter to explode, of course, So, but I was actually, I'm pretty impressed with the stunts. I mean, I'm sure, movie magic and all that, they probably weren't all that far off of the ground, but still, there's a guy hanging off the helicopter. There's clearly no wires or things like that, to keep him safe. And, knowing what we know about Golan and Globus, I'm sure the guy's just hanging off the helicopter. So, it all feels pretty dangerous. And then, add into the fact that he's got to jump off with a girl. It's like, all right.
Yeah. And so, but he gets off, they're on the roof. And then, Steve James shoots the rocket and blows up the helicopter, and that's almost the end of the movie. We get a kind of final scene where he picks up Judy Aronson. One thing I should point out, that she's wearing much more functional clothing here. She's got her Gloria Vanderbilt jeans on, I think, and
the bright red shirt. Yeah.
Exactly. But he takes her to the edge of the roof and drops her, and Steve James catches her, which I think is, I guess that's the best way to get her off the roof. But that's it. That's our movie. We get our credits playing, and I think that's it, right? I don't think there was anything else after
that's pretty much it. We take care of business, and that's that. I mean, there's no mourning her dead father or anything like that. But
no, I guess when you find out your dad is that person, though she was upset that he got shot initially, so she was upset about that. But you're right, she kind of got over it pretty quickly. So So that
he was a bad guy who had a bigger picture on his wall of John Wayne than he had of her, so exactly. She's okay with it,
right? And again, because we don't know how old she is. I mean, is she an orphan now? Was the mom still in the picture? Or they just split and she was living in the Philippines? Was she just visiting for a period? Like, was this like the summer maybe? And because I did read that it was supposed to be really hot there, because Dudikoff said those sequences he did in the ninja outfit were horrible. I guess he also caught malaria. I guess so all of that stuff was kind of a mess for him, but maybe that was it. She was on summer break and she was staying with her dad, and then she stays with her mom in Van Nuys, I guess,
I always assume in these situations where, again, going back to what we were saying before, you have the colonel or the general, and they have their young attractive daughter on the base. I always assume that the mom is out of the picture at that point, because if there was a mom living back in California or wherever they happen to be, she would probably be like, "No way, you're taking our daughter to the Philippines. I don't care."
Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. I mean, I guess maybe staying there for the summer, but you're right. Like, it's just, yeah, even as much as he says it's safe, yeah, can you really believe that? So, especially with what happened here, right? Yeah. So,
moms know there's ninjas lurking in the trees. It's not safe.
I'm not letting you go where there's ninjas, honey. Sorry. Yeah. Your dad can come here to visit you, Yeah, exactly. Well,
that's the thing about ninjas, though. You never know where they could be. I mean, you could be at the mall in California somewhere, and there's still ninjas lurking around, because that's their thing. They hide. You don't know they're there.
Exactly, because if we look at the other ninja series, the second two movies take place in L.A. So actually, we do get L.A. ninjas. So yeah, that's a good point. She could be at the mall. I mean, she could be possessed by a ninja. In fact, if she's living in California.
Well, yeah, that's the best way to have a ninja, because, like we said, Ninja 3: The Domination, amazing.
Exactly, beautiful. Exactly. Well, Todd, as we're wrapping up here, anything else on American Ninja that we missed?
I mean, we hit a bunch of it. I think we did pretty well here. I mean, like I said, I pulled this thing up while we were watching it. I kind of jumped forward and back a little bit, but it was amazing how, as soon as a scene was coming up, what you were saying, fit exactly with what I was seeing on my screen at the moment. I was like, oh yeah, remember that great moment. I actually am feeling more motivated now. I have seen the second one. Like I said, it's been a couple years, but after having done a rewatch here on the first one, I was like, I should go ahead and rewatch the second one and then make my way through the others. There's like 3 more after that, right? It's a total of 5. Is that right?
Now 3 has Steve James, but doesn't have Dudikoff. It has they moved to David Bradley. 4 has Bradley and James, but not. Bradley and Dudikoff, but not James. And then 5, they go back to Bradley. Okay. They're interesting movies from here. 4 is probably the next best one after 1 and 2, I would say.
All right. Yeah. I mean, I've got to do it. I'm one of those people that's like, if I've seen one American Ninja, I got to see the rest of the American Ninjas. So.
Yeah, and they're all on Tubi here in the States, so they are all available.
Yeah.
So yeah. All right, well, Todd, as we're wrapping up, anything that you'd like to plug?
Well, of course, I'll always plug my podcast. My podcast is called the Forgotten Filmcast, and you can find that in all the places where you find your podcasts. Matt has been a guest on my show several times. He will be again, I assure you. But on each episode, we look at a film that's kind of fallen off the radar. I'm usually joined by another podcaster or film blogger, and we do a deep dive on that. I'm actually working on an episode right now that is a little different than what we've done. I've kind of tried to shake things up a little bit here this year. I added a new trivia game segment to the show, which has been a lot of fun. But the episode I'm working on right now, I actually don't have a guest. I'm gonna actually talk about several films that are ones I've kind of had on my list of potential films for the show, but I've had no takers on. So I'm just going to go like, all right, I just watched these movies because nobody else would watch them with me, and I'm just going to share some thoughts on them. So kind of a different episode coming up.
Yeah, I enjoy solo podcasting because I have my what I call DTVC Extra. That's sort of my solo outlet. But it is kind of a fun thing to just kind of load up the thing and just kind of go for it and just talk. And there's a market for it. People enjoy it, And so I'm excited to check that one out.
Yeah. I was like, I like talking with other folks, bouncing things off them, seeing what other people have to say about things. But I thought, let's shake things up a bit. Let's do one that's a little different.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool. I definitely can't wait to check that out. And everybody should be subscribed to your podcast. I am subscribed. Check it out. I love the episodes. I think one of the more recent ones you did was actually with guests that we had on our podcast, which actually, I found her being on your podcast. Jeanette Ward was the Perfect Weapon episode, which I think fans of this podcast would definitely, you guys do a fantastic job going over that movie.
I'm glad she got to be on your show. I've had her on many times in years past, and it had been a little while since I'd had her on the show, and I had her back on. And as soon as I was done with that podcast, I was like, I need to get her and Matt hooked up because she's on the same wavelength as
Yeah.
far as the movies that you talk about. So
Yeah, no, it was perfect. She ended up being the final Skype episode I recorded, and I couldn't find the recording anywhere. It had been moved to Teams already, so I luckily was able to log into Teams and find it because it was like heart in my throat kind of thing. Like, oh boy, where did that episode go?
yeah, I'm working on the transition with that too. I know what you said you had that trouble. I recorded an episode and I was so nervous, if it was going to work out. I've always got some other backup things going on, and I actually when I'm putting together my podcast, the track I would get from Skype would usually just serve as kind of my guide track, and then I'd do the tracks that I recorded independently on other things to kind of piece together, so I could manipulate things a little bit more. But I was a little nervous I wasn't going to have that Skype guide track this time. It came through fine, but yeah, I mean, it's like I'm still kind of weighing my options. I'm kind of looking at just making the transition to Teams, but I mean, when you've been doing a podcast for 10 years or so and been using Skype all this time, I mean, Microsoft, you don't realize what you're doing to us. I mean, we're like creatures of habit here. You expect us to change? I mean, no, it's a crisis,
Yeah, I would say 90 to 90, at least 90% of the podcasters that I work with use Skype in some way. I mean, there's a couple that will use something else, but for the most part, everybody uses Skype. Even if they don't record the Skype through Skype, they use like a recording software that the audio comes from Skype into the thing. And so, yeah, it's really shaking up the podcasting world, this whole end of Skype.
Yeah. I mean, and part of it too, I mean, Skype was free, and that's the thing. I mean, folks that don't do podcasts, maybe don't realize, but we're at least podcasters like me. When you're just an independent podcast, sitting down here in my basement, surrounded by the boxes of all the kinds of bric-a-brac that we haven't been able to part with yet. It's no budget. It's a no budget endeavor here. And so Skype being a free service, I mean, that was a blessing, and like, we're always looking for every little thing we can do to not have to put a lot of money into this, I almost said habit. It is a habit. It's an addictive habit, but it's a hobby. I mean, when I first started podcasting, I've upgraded my mic since then, but when I first started podcasting, the microphone that I used was literally the USB microphone that came with the Beatles Rock Band game that we bought for the Nintendo Wii. And I was like, I plugged that thing into the USB port of my computer, and it was amazing. I would have so many people that were guests on my show say to me, "What microphone are you using? Because it sounds so much better than mine." And I was always like, believe it or not, it's the one from Rock Band. And so we do everything we can to not have to blow a lot of money on our passion of making podcasts here.
Right.
So.
Exactly. No, we're on the margins completely. It's not like Joe Rogan, who's got, a nine-figure salary and he can record on whatever he wants. Yeah. We don't, until Spotify subsidizes us, we're working on the margins here for sure.
And see, that's the thing. I mean, while, there are certainly podcasts that I enjoy that are the more professional thing, that have sponsorships, that have, all that kind of thing going on, celebrity ones, maybe I'm slightly biased because I am just some dork in his basement making a podcast, but the podcasts that I gravitate towards are the ones that are made by just average Joes like you and me, talking about things that they really enjoy. The folks that I've connected with in the podcast world, those are those kind of people. And, I'm that kind of guy. I can tell Matt is that kind of guy. I would much rather listen to somebody like Matt talk about movies than talk about some comedian who feels like he needs to make a movie podcast to stay relevant. That's much more valuable to me.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like, we kind of know these movies. We love these movies. We love talking about them, and it comes through in the podcast. And you're right. It's like it's a labor of love, right? We're not just trying to find a way to get some money between gigs when, hopefully, like that Vegas show sells out enough, right? We are actually like, yeah, we really love this kind of thing. I mean, it would be nice to have a Vegas show ourselves, but this is enough for now.
I will not turn down, if someone comes to me with a sponsorship, and says, "Hey, I want to give you a ton of money to make your podcast in your basement," I'm not going to turn up a nose at that. But still, it's never been about that for me. It's just because I want to connect with people who love movies. And so if a way to do that is by me doing a silly podcast out of my basement, that works for me.
Yeah. No, it is. It's a great thing. Like I said, I love listening to your podcast. I love listening to you and your guests talk about movies. And I love that kind of thing. And I think it's, again, same thing we're doing here is just to kind of, give people, you get a couple hours of just listening to, or hour and a half or however long, just some fun conversation about movies and hopefully, and we had a little conversation about baseball as well to start us off here. So yeah, exactly. Well, Todd, thank you again for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Always a pleasure. Like I said, I always look forward to your invites on this. So yeah, looking forward to the next time when we'll talk some Jen Belushi or whatever. I'm always game. Whatever you have for me.
No, I think Belushi might be a great one for us to do as well. So we'll look forward to that. Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Todd. And thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.